Only then did they catch a clear glimpse of the humanoid figure beside the elderly man, and they discovered it to be a young man who appeared to be in his 20s. It was none other than Han Li. Before the high-grade devilish beings had a chance to seize back control over their treasures, spatial fluctuations erupted overhead, and a streak of golden light shot forth before rapidly revolving around them at an incredible speed, then appeared over 100 feet away in a flash. The golden light faded to reveal a yellow beast that was around 10 feet in size. The beast had a lithe and streamlined body, and it resembled a leopard with a pair of small green horns on its head. As soon as it appeared, it turned toward the four devilish beings with a derisive look in its eyes. Strangely enough, the four devilish beings remained rooted to the spot, and the expressions on their faces were also quite peculiar. In the next instant, countless thin gashes suddenly appeared over their bodies, and they fell apart as piles of dismembered body parts right before the elderly man's astonished eyes. Their blood rained down into the devilish cloud from above, and as soon as the low-grade devilish beasts within the devilish cloud came into contact with their blood, they were immediately driven insane and began to tear viciously into one another. The armored devilish warriors were completely stunned and horrified to see this, and one of them suddenly yelled out an order for retreat, upon which all of them instantly fled the scene as quickly as they could, leaving the frenzied horde of devilish beasts behind. Han Li's expression darkened upon seeing this. There was no way he was going to let these devilish beings escape. He immediately transmitted his voice to the leopard Kirin beast. "I'll leave these devilish beasts to you. I'll take care of those devilish warriors myself." The leopard Kirin beast nodded in response, then conjured up several tens of faint golden projections of itself, all of which pounced directly toward the low-grade devilish beasts like lightning. As for Han Li, he merely remained still on the spot before extending a hand out of his sleeve. He made a casual grabbing motion, and a ball of piercing golden lightning suddenly emerged amid a loud thunderclap. Immediately thereafter, he spread his fingers open. Countless arcs of lightning that were as thick as human fingers erupted forth in all directions. Radiant golden light flashed, and the arcs of lightning reached the fleeing devilish beings in a flash before striking them viciously from behind. These low-grade devilish beings were naturally no match for the fearsome powers of the divine devilbane lightning, and all of them were quickly reduced to dust amid rumbling thunderclaps and flashes of golden light. The nearby devilish cloud and devilish winds were also eradicated by the golden lightning, and at this point, all of the low-grade devilish beasts had also been reduced to piles of blood and flesh by the leopard Kirin beast. Everything had transpired within the span of just a few breaths, and before the elderly man even had a chance to react to the situation, all of their pursuers had been slain. Only then did the elderly man return to his senses, and he hurriedly turned to Han Li with an ecstatic look in his eyes. "Thank you for saving us, Senior. Are you an elder of Deep Heaven City?" "I guess I technically am. Where did all of you come from? Why did you come here instead of hiding somewhere more secure? Don't you know that the area around Deep Heaven City has already been taken over by devilish beings?" Han Li asked in an indifferent manner. "We are cultivators of the Xianxia sect. Unfortunately, the location of our sect was discovered by devilish beings, so we had no choice but to leave. We stumbled into a devilish ambush near the teleportation formation up ahead, and we were almost killed as a result," the elderly man hurriedly explained. "So the teleportation formation up ahead really has been taken over by devilish beings, eh? Are there any other high-grade devilish beings up ahead aside from the ones I just killed?" Han Li asked. "There are a few more high-grade devilish beings near the teleportation formation, but all of them are injured. Otherwise, they would have pursued us as well," the elderly man replied in a truthful manner. "I see. In that case, I'll have to take care of them quickly. Otherwise, if they receive news of what happened here, they could destroy the teleportation formation to prevent us from using it," Han Li murmured to himself with furrowed brows. The elderly man's expression also changed slightly upon hearing this. At this moment, the remaining Xianxia sect disciples were led toward the elderly man by the hideous elderly woman, and they were all appraising Han Li with awe and veneration in their eyes. Before they had a chance to say anything, Han Li waved a hand toward the leopard Kirin beast. An azure light flashed from his body as he hurtled directly toward the canyon up ahead. The leopard Kirin beast also quickly followed along as a streak of golden light. In the blink of an eye, the two of them vanished into the distance. The elderly woman hurriedly flew over to the elderly man with a solemn look on her face. "What should we do? senior marshal brother. We follow that senior, of course. With him leading the way, we should be able to make it into Deep Heaven City. Follow me, everyone. This will be our final chance to make it to safety, the elderly man replied without any hesitation. The elderly woman immediately nodded in response. After quickly taking a few more pills to replenish his magic power, a slightly abnormal flush appeared on the elderly man's face, and he immediately flew toward the canyon, followed by all of the remaining disciples of the Xianxia sect. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D633, letter 1D626, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 2112F, letter 1D624, letter 1D45C, letter 1D62E. In contrast with the unease and anxiety they had been experiencing before, all of them were now filled with hope and excitement. A distance of less than 1,000 kilometers naturally didn't take very long to cover for cultivators like them, and a short while later, they arrived near the canyon. But before they had a chance to descend toward it, they were greeted by an earth-shattering boom. Several streaks of azure sword chi erupted into the heavens from within the canyon, then vanished in a flash. Immediately thereafter, an anguished howl rang out, and a gust of black devilish wind swept out of the canyon, within which was a horned devilish shadow that was fleeing in a horrified manner. The elderly man and elderly woman exchanged a glance upon seeing this, and both of them could see their own elation mirrored in one another's eyes. It seemed that the senior they had just encountered had made short work of the high-grade devilish beings in the canyon as well. The elderly man immediately drew his flying swords, while the woman opened her mouth to expel a remarkably thin, silver flying blade. The two of them naturally intended to stop the devilish being's nascent soul from escaping. However, before they had a chance to do anything, a cold harumph rang out from within the valley, and a streak of sword chi that was over 100 feet shot forth before sweeping through the nascent soul. A cold light flashed, and the nascent soul was reduced to nothingness before it could even utter a single sound. The azure sword chi then faded into an azure flying sword that was only around a foot in length before flying back into the canyon. Han Li's indifferent voice then rang out from deep within the canyon. If you want to enter Deep Heaven City as well, then hurry up. The devilish reinforcements could get here at any moment. The elderly man was ecstatic to hear this, and he immediately yelled, "Everyone full speed ahead." All of the cultivators immediately hurtled through the air as if their lives depended on it, descending straight into the canyon as streaks of spiritual light. Inside Deep Heaven City, two nascent soul stage guards were chatting idly as they stood at the entrance of a teleportation hall, which had been surrounded by many powerful restrictions. All of a sudden, one of the dozen or so teleportation formations in the hall began to radiate dazzling white light and emit bursts of loud buzzing sounds. Someone's teleporting into the city. Activate all of the restrictions right away and inform our superiors of this. One of the nascent soul stage guards immediately yelled in an alarmed manner. The other guard immediately flipped a hand over to produce a palm-sized blue formation plate, then slammed his other hand onto it. A burst of five-colored light erupted from the formation plate amid a dull thump, and all types of fluctuations instantly appeared around the entire hall. At the same time, light barriers and golden and silver runes emerged to seal off the entire hall. In a pavilion near the hall, over 100 meditating guards abruptly rose to their feet without any warning, then flew out of the pavilion as streaks of spiritual light. Spatial fluctuations suddenly emanated from the buzzing teleportation formation, following which an azure humanoid figure emerged. As soon as Han Li opened his eyes, he was greeted by the sight of around a dozen guards appraising him with wary expressions as if they were anticipating a battle, and he smiled as he said, "I've only been away for 2 or 3 years. Have you all forgotten about me already?" The leader of the guards identified Han Li right away, and an ecstatic look appeared on his face as he said in a respectful manner, "Ah, it's Senior Han. This is fantastic news. I'll inform the elders right away. Many of the elders have left us with instructions to report back to them as soon as we receive any news about you. I see, I'll be paying a visit to the elders in person. By the way, there will be some more people arriving through this teleportation formation," Han Li said in a nonchalant manner. The guard was rather surprised to hear this, but he still immediately bowed in response. "There are others. That's no problem. We'll be sure to take good care of them." Thus, Han Li emerged from the teleportation formation and strode out of the hall. Not long thereafter, white light flashed again, and another 2 humanoid figures emerged within the teleportation formation. They were none other than the sword-bearing elderly man and the hideous elderly woman. Letter 1D557, letter 1D42B, letter 1D41E, letter 1D556, letter 1D568, letter 1D41E, letter 1D41C, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D696. And Li paid no heed to this, and rose up into the air before flying back toward his own abode. During his flight, he released his spiritual sense throughout the surrounding area, and he discovered that compared to when he had first left, Deep Heaven City was currently a lot more peaceful. Aside from the patrolling guards on the streets, there were very few vagrant cultivators around. The number of patrolling guards had also increased by severalfold, and all passing cultivators had to undergo stern examinations before being granted passage. There was a tense atmosphere throughout the entire city. With the enormous spiritual pressure that Han Li was giving off, there were naturally no patrolling guards who dared to get in his way. Thus, the stone pagoda that he had been reciting in quickly appeared in the distance, and he flew directly into the hall on the highest level. After looking around, a faint smile appeared on his face. Everything was identical to how he had left it, but the floor was spotlessly clean, clearly indicating that the room had been regularly cleaned and looked after. It seemed that his disciples hadn't slacked off during his absence. And Li sat down onto the chair at the center of the hall, then swept a sleeve through the air. Two talismans immediately shot forth before vanishing into thin air as two balls of fire, following which Han Li closed his eyes and waited in silence. Moments later, two humanoid figures appeared outside the hall amid flashes of spiritual light. One of them was a handsome blue-robed young man, while the other was a young Taoist priest with a wide grin on his face. They were none other than Han Li's disciples, Hai Yueshan and Qi Lingzi. Elated looks immediately appeared on their faces at the sight of Han Li, and they immediately rushed forward before extending respectful bows. "We're so glad you've made a safe return, Master." "Oh, did you too think that something had happened to me?" Han Li asked with a hint of a smile on his face. "It's been a long time since you returned to Deep Heaven City, and there were some rumors being spread in the city, stating that you may have already perished by the hands of a sacred ancestor. However, those rumors are clearly all false now that you've returned safe and sound," Hai Yueshan said in an excited manner. Qi Lingzi also nodded emphatically in agreement. "Those rumors aren't entirely unfounded. I did indeed encounter some trouble and was forced into an extremely perilous situation by some sacred ancestor clones," Han Li said as his brows furrowed slightly. Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan's smiles immediately faded upon hearing this. "But that's all in the past. I'm back now, aren't I? On top of that, I encountered a great opportunity during this trip, and I can now begin preparing for a breakthrough to the late body integration stage," Han Li continued with a smile. "You're going to make another breakthrough. That's fantastic. I look forward to the day Master becomes the most powerful cultivator in Deep Heaven City. Allow to congratulate you in advance, Master. With your incredible powers, even a sacred ancestor clone would be no match for Master after you reach the late body integration stage." Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan were both extremely elated to hear this, and immediately began to flatter Han Li. Han Li couldn't help but chuckle with amusement, but a thought then suddenly occurred to him. "How is fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix doing? I don't seem to have detected her presence with my spiritual sense." Hai Yueshan and Qi Lingzi's smiles stiffened upon hearing this, and they exchanged a peculiar glance before one of them replied in a hesitant manner, "Master, Senior Ice Phoenix was invited to a gathering." Han Li was immediately able to identify that something was amiss, and his expression darkened slightly as he asked, "Are you too hiding something from me?" Qi Lingzi's heart stirred upon hearing this, and he hurriedly replied, "We wouldn't dare, Master. It's just that we're not sure how to inform you of the situation. Truth be told, Senior Phoenix isn't attending this gathering of her own volition." "What do you mean? Is she being forced by someone else?" Han Li was rather surprised to hear this. It seems that someone became aware of Senior Phoenix's true form, and they've constantly been nagging Senior Phoenix during the time you've been away. Due to your absence, there was no way for Senior Phoenix to avoid his harassment, Hai Yueshan said as a resentful look appeared in his eyes. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly upon hearing this, and after a short while he asked in a cold voice, "Fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix is a spatial tempering cultivator. Who would dare to harass her? Our human and demon races have forged an alliance during this devilish tribulation, so her identity as a demon shouldn't be an issue here. I know all of the elders of the city. Even during my absence, I'm sure they wouldn't do something like this. Could it be that this is an outsider who only recently joined Deep Heaven City?" Your wisdom is truly unmatched, Master. I heard from Senior Phoenix that this man is a grand elder of Heavenly City who only recently joined Deep Heaven City. You took such huge risk to reinforce their city, yet he's repaying your kindness by doing something like this. What an ungrateful piece of scum. Qi Lingzi grumbled in an enraged manner. Heavenly City, that's rather interesting. I've met both of the body integration stage grand elders of the city. Which one of the two is behind this? Han Li asked as he stroked his own chin. It's Master Azure Dragon of the Nine-Star Sect, Hai Yueshan replied without any hesitation. Han Li raised an eyebrow as he said in a cold voice, I see. What reason does he have for harassing fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix? There must be some enormous benefit to be reaped for him if he dares to do something like this despite knowing the relationship between fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix and myself. Senior Ice Phoenix never mentioned this to us, but we heard through other avenues that this Azure Dragon seems to wish to engage in dual cultivation with Senior Ice Phoenix, and is willing to make her one of his concubines, Hai Yueshan replied after a brief pause. Everything immediately became clear to Han Li upon hearing this, and he chuckled coldly. Dual cultivation, eh? He, what a sly old bastard. He didn't know how Master Azure Dragon had managed to identify the Ice Phoenix's true form, but it seemed that he was aware of the benefits of Ice Phoenix origin Yin Qi, and that was why he was trying to court the Ice Phoenix at all costs. As for why he still hadn't achieved his objective, this was partially due to the Ice Phoenix's unwillingness to oblige, and also due to the fact that he couldn't force himself upon her, as he had to maintain his reputation in the eyes of the other body integration cultivators in the city. Of course, the reason why he dared to be so reckless in the first place had to be because he had thought that Han Li had already perished. Han Li contemplated the situation for a moment before asking, what is fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix's stance on this? Is she against this? Of course she's against this. In the beginning, she constantly hid in the pagoda to avoid this Master Azure Dragon, but after that, he somehow forced her to meet him a few times outside the pagoda. Senior Ice Phoenix was very careful and made sure to meet him only in places where there were many people around. But I heard that this Master Azure Dragon is becoming quite impatient and has threatened on multiple occasions to use force if Senior Ice Phoenix continues to resist. We've always been very concerned about this, but we know that the Elder of the City won't step in unless that Master Azure Dragon actually does something out of line. I'm assuming this is also why Master Azure Dragon had refrained from taking drastic measures up to this point. Qi Lingzi was clearly smarter than Hai Yueshan and offered his own analysis. Han Li nodded in response as a hint of killing intent flashing through his eyes. Perhaps so. Do you know where this gathering is being held? I heard that it's going to be a small exchange convention held at the Origin Pocket Pavilion. However, only cultivators at or above the spatial tempering stage can attend the convention, so we were unable to accompany Senior Ice Phoenix, Hai Yueshan replied in a resigned manner. You two wouldn't be able to make any difference even if you had accompanied her. So be it, I'll make a trip there myself and bring her back, Han Li said with a dark expression before rising to his feet. He then flew directly out of the stone pavilion, and Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan were both quite startled by Han Li's abrupt departure as they hurriedly extended respectful parting salutes. When the two of them raised their heads again, Han Li was already nowhere to be seen. The two of them couldn't help but exchange a glance upon seeing this. Master normally doesn't interact much with Senior Ice Phoenix. I didn't think he cared that much about her. Do you think Master has feelings for her? Perhaps we'll have to start referring to Senior Ice Phoenix as Mistress soon, Hai Yueshan said as a suggestive smile appeared on his face. It's best for us not to discuss our seniors like this, but it's certainly a possibility. Qi Lingzi was giving quite a straight-laced response, but the look on his face clearly indicated that he was very curious as well. Hai Yueshan naturally rolled his eyes at him upon seeing this. At this point, Han Li was already several tens of kilometers away. He had stayed in Deep Heaven City for quite some time, and during that time, he had visited the renowned Origin Pocket Pavilion on 2 or 3 occasions. The pavilion was rather far away from his stone pagoda, and he couldn't fly at full speed in the city, so it would take him some time to get there. As he was flying through the air, there was a contemplative look in his eyes, indicating that he seemed to be pondering something. The Origin Pocket Pavilion was a place for high-grade cultivators to meet up and hold discussions. Its owner was a body integration stage elder of Deep Heaven City, so no one dared to cause any trouble in the pavilion. As such, The pavilion had always had a good reputation among the cultivators of Deep Heaven City. Many cultivators would rent out a certain level of the pavilion if they were holding a small exchange convention or discussing some secretive matters, and the reputation of the pavilion placed everyone's hearts at ease. After flying for a long while, a lush forest that spanned an area of over 100 acres appeared up ahead. At the center of the forest were 4 pavilions, 1 large and 3 small. The largest pavilion was over 10,000 feet tall and wasn't any lesser in stature compared to the stone pagodas of Deep Heaven City. Even the 3 smaller pavilions were around 3,000 to 4,000 feet tall, presenting quite a majestic sight to behold. Han Li's expression remained unchanged at the sight of these pavilions, but he sped up by about twofold. At this moment, there were several yellow-robed nascent soul cultivators standing guard at the entrance of the first level of the tallest pavilion, chatting idly among themselves. All of a sudden, a blur flashed past their eyes, and something seemed to pass right by them and entered the pavilion. The guards were naturally very alarmed to see this, and they hurriedly turned toward the entrance, while one of them instantly summoned an alarm-raising talisman. Right at this moment, a cold harumph rang out from the entrance, and a powerful burst of spiritual pressure swept forth from within. The air around the guards instantly tightened, and they were completely immobilized. Only then did they catch a glimpse of an azure-robed figure who had appeared in the hall on the first floor of the pavilion. Even though he had his back facing them, the spiritual pressure emanating from the azure-robed figure's body was completely unfathomable to them, and sweat began to pour down their faces. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D493, letter 1D486, letter 1D65A, letter 1D498, letter 1D486, letter 1D484, letter 1D490, letter 1D4F6. Don't raise the alarm, I'm here for a friend. Once I find the person I'm looking for, I'll leave, the azure figure said in a calm yet implacable voice. In the next instant, the azure figure blurred and vanished into thin air, completely disregarding the restrictions in the pavilion. As soon as he vanished, the enormous spiritual pressure faded, and all of the guards regained their mobility. Who was that? How dare he barge straight into the Origin Pocket Pavilion? Does he not know who the owner of the pavilion is? A young guard yelled in an enraged manner as soon as he recovered his freedom. The other guards didn't say anything, but they also wore extremely dark expressions. HMPH, you should shut your mouth if you don't want to die. A blue-haired elderly man suddenly interjected in a low voice to cut off the young guard. The young guard faltered slightly upon hearing this before turning to the elderly man. What do you mean by that, fellow Taoist? Do you know who that was? I do. All of you only recently joined this pavilion, so it's no surprise that you don't recognize him. I once had the honor of seeing this senior Han from afar, and he's a mid-body integration cultivator, so his cultivation base outstrips even that of the pavilion's owner, the elderly man said in a grim voice. What? A mid-body integration cultivator? The other guards all drew a sharp breath upon hearing this, and the young guard who had just spoken instantly turned deathly pale. For a mid-body integration cultivator, killing them wouldn't be much more difficult than crushing ants, if he were to be one to hold grudges. The young guard's back was already drenched in cold sweat. A thought suddenly occurred to one of the other guards, and he exclaimed, a mid-body integration stage senior with a Han surname. Could it be? That's right. He's none other than the senior Han who was rumored to have perished 2 years ago. Seeing as he's appeared here, those rumors are all clearly false, the elderly man confirmed with a nod. I could sense a powerful, baleful aura emanating from his body. It doesn't seem like he has very peaceful intentions. Is he really just here to look for a friend? If something happens, the reputation of the pavilion will be damaged, the young guard murmured. Hints of fear flashed through everyone's eyes again upon hearing this. We have no power to dictate what Senior Han does here. Even if he completely destroys the Origin Pocket Pavilion, the pavilion owner won't pin the blame on us. The pavilion's rules only apply to normal cultivators. You can't expect to enforce them on someone like Senior Han, the blue-haired elderly chuckled before falling silent. All of the other guards nodded in agreement, and they no longer discussed this matter, treating it as if it had never happened. Only that young guard was still clearly very concerned, and occasionally peeked into the pavilion through the entrance. Meanwhile, on a level of the pavilion that had been sealed by many layers of restrictions, there were 7 or 8 people sitting around a white-robed woman, seemingly trying to persuade her about something. The white-robed woman had skin as fair as snow and a set of beautiful facial features, but she wore an extremely cold expression. It was none other than the Ice Phoenix, who had been invited to this gathering. Upon arriving here, she discovered that there wasn't any exchange convention taking place. She immediately sensed that something was wrong and tried to leave, only to be trapped by the restrictions on this level of the pavilion. Immediately thereafter, the people attending the gathering took turns to try and persuade and coerce her. They had clearly all been bribed by Azure Dragon to do so. Come to think of it, you're an Ice Phoenix, so you have some connection with our Black Phoenix race. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been constantly corresponding between you and Senior Azure Dragon during this past period of time. If you continue to stall like this, Senior Azure Dragon's patience is eventually going to run out. With his mid-body integration stage powers, you would be completely powerless to resist if he were to try and take you by force, so you may as well agree. Senior Azure Dragon's powers and status are not inferior to that hand brat's in the slightest, so why continue to resist? The person who was speaking was a young beauty in a black dress. It was none other than Xiao Hong of the Black Phoenix race. After being forced to go into seclusion for a while by the Black Phoenix demon monarch, she seemed to have made significant strides in her cultivation base. The rest of the group was comprised of other human and demonic beings, all of whom were acquaintances of the Ice Phoenix, and they were all trying to convince her of the same thing. Following the commencement of the devilish tribulation, the boundary between humans and demons in the city had already been removed, which was why both sides were free to appear in any part of the city. Even so, most ordinary beings wouldn't stray out of their designated area for no good reason, and only high-grade beings would regularly traverse through both areas. The demonic beings among this group were all spatial tempering cultivators, so they naturally had the right to appear here. However, there really wasn't much creativity with the approaches they were taking. They were merely rattling off the same narrative about how Master Azure Dragon was a body integration cultivator, and that countless female cultivators in the city would be over the moon if they were chosen by Master Azure Dragon as a dual cultivation partner. However, regardless of what they said, the Ice Phoenix remained completely silent, and her frosty gaze made it seem as if she were trying to freeze the opposite wall solid. Xiao Hong's brows furrowed tightly upon seeing this, and after a while, a cold look appeared in her eyes as she said, "We've said everything we have to say. It's time for you to give us a verdict now. Are you willing to engage in dual cultivation with Senior Azure Dragon?" It seemed that she was the leader of the group of persuaders. The Ice Phoenix finally responded, but her words were as sharp as daggers. "I won't agree to this no matter what you say. Come to think of it, I find this to be rather strange. As a member of our demon race, shouldn't you be aware that engaging in dual cultivation with humans is strictly prohibited in our race? Are you not afraid that the Black Phoenix demon monarch will punish you for trying to extort me in Master Azure Dragon's stead in such a blatant manner?" Xiao Hong's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, but her expression quickly returned to normal as she chuckled. "How silly of me to have forgotten to mention this. Senior Azure Dragon possesses a demonic bloodline, so he's a half-demon. It's just that he chose to remain in the human race and eventually became the Grand Elder of the Nine-Star Sect. As such, I'm not concerned about that at all. Besides, even if Senior Azure Dragon weren't a half-demon, our human and demon races must unite against the devilish army, so the demon monarchs and body integration stage elders will all turn a blind eye anyway. Having said that, your answer has been quite disappointing. You leave me with no choice but to defer you to someone else." Someone else? The Ice Phoenix's face immediately paled upon hearing this, and she seemed to have already guessed whom Xiao Hong was referring to. Sure enough, Xiao Hong immediately rose to her feet before turning to one of the side doors of the hall in a respectful manner. "Senior Azure Dragon, we've done everything in our power, but it seems you'll have to convince fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix in person." "I see. It seems I'll have to tame this disobedient little Ice Phoenix myself, even though I'm very reluctant to have to resort to something like this." A male voice rang out from the other side of the door, following which the door was opened, and a brocade-robed man strode into the room in an unhurried manner. The man appeared to be around 40 years of age and had a very authoritative appearance. He was holding a thick white book in his hand, and it was none other than Master Azure Dragon. "You should be aware that you won't be able to get what you want if you force me to comply against my will. Besides, aren't you worried about what the other seniors in the city will think?" the Ice Phoenix asked in a cold voice. "If you had said this several days ago, perhaps I would have been a little concerned, but now I've already cultivated a new ability that will make you comply willingly to me. As for the other fellow Taoists of Deep Heaven City, don't place your hope in them. I've already officially joined Deep Heaven City and became an elder yesterday. Do you think the panel of elders will turn against me in preference for someone who's already dead?" Master Azure Dragon replied in a cold voice, completely doing away with all semblance of geniality. The Ice Phoenix's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and she heaved a faint sigh before suddenly raising a jade bowl in her hand, then waving it through the air like lightning. A white spatial rift instantly appeared, and she immediately disappeared into the rift. Everything had happened far too quickly for Xiao Hong and her group to react in time, and when they tried to stop her, it was already too late. However, Master Azure Dragon's expression remained unchanged as he gently brandished his white book. Silver light flashed, and an ancient silver rune emerged from the book, then swelled to the size of a human head before drifting over to where the spatial rift had just vanished. A loud boom rang out, and the silver rune exploded, following which the space there shattered like a sheet of glass. A muffled groan rang out as the Ice Phoenix stumbled out of midair, and only after taking a few steps backward did she manage to just barely right herself. She then looked up at Master Azure Dragon, and even though her expression remained as cold as ever, a hint of despair had crept into her eyes. "HMPH, if you could get away right under my nose, then I'll spell my name backward from now on. Now then, are you going to allow these fellow Taoists to seal off your magic power, or are you going to make me do it?" Master Azure Dragon asked with a haughty look on his face. Xiao Hong and the others instantly surrounded her from all sides, and the Ice Phoenix's heart sank even further. Just as Xiao Hong was about to spring into action, a cold male voice suddenly sounded within the hall. "Oh, what's your name going to sound like when spelled backward? Would you be able to give me a verbal demonstration, fellow Taoist Azure Dragon?" At the same time, a resounding boom rang out, and the door, which had been sealed tightly shut by multiple restrictions, suddenly exploded inward. Immediately thereafter, a violent burst of power surged into the room, and the two spatial tempering cultivators situated in front of the door were hurled up into the air like a pair of sandbags, then smashed heavily into the opposing wall. Unfortunately for them, the wall had also been reinforced by restrictions, and they weren't simultaneous cultivators as Han Li was, so they were instantly knocked out cold with blood. It seemed that even their nascent souls had been knocked unconscious by the impact. Everyone else was naturally very alarmed by this, and they immediately rushed away from the door. Master Azure Dragon's expression also changed drastically upon hearing this voice, whereas the Ice Phoenix immediately turned toward the entrance with elation in her eyes. The terrifying aura that had surged into the room receded, and an azure-robed young man walked in. It was none other than Han Li. Letter 1D453, letter 1D45F, letter 212F, letter 1D626, letter 1D4CC, letter 1D626, letter 1D450, letter 2134, letter 1D4C2. "Brother Han, you're finally back," the Ice Phoenix said as an excited flush appeared on her face. Han Li nodded in response as he turned to the Ice Phoenix with a faint smile on his face. "I encountered some trouble along the way, but thankfully I was able to make a safe return." Following a brief moment of panic, Master Azure Dragon immediately returned to his senses before forcing a smile onto his own face as he said, "It's truly fantastic news that you were able to escape from that sacred ancestor, Brother Han. We have to organize a feast to celebrate your return." However, Han Li didn't even take a single glance at him. Instead, he turned toward Xiao Hong in a completely emotionless manner, and his eyes were like a pair of sharp daggers. Aside from the two cultivators who were lying unconscious on the ground, all of the other spatial tempering cultivators immediately turned deathly pale. Even the ones among them who hadn't ever met Han Li in the past had naturally realized who he was, and their hearts were filled with horror. The main reason why they had agreed to help Master Azure Dragon was that he had guaranteed them that Han Li was already dead. Otherwise, they would have never dared to meddle in something like this. As it turned out, not only was Han Li not dead, he had caught them red-handed, and the evidence of their involvement was downright irrefutable. "Welcome back to the city, Senior Han, my master." A burly man with a rather crude appearance cupped his fist in a salute as he approached Han Li, but Han Li merely swept a sleeve toward him, and he was immediately sent flying before also crashing into the opposite. He then thumped down onto the ground and threw up a mouthful of blood, unable to get up again. Everyone hurriedly turned their attention toward him to find a large hole had been torn into the front of his robes, revealing a suit of smooth silver armor. The armor appeared to have remained completely unscathed, but in the next instant, a crisp crack rang out, and the suit of armor shattered into pieces that fell onto the ground around him. Han Li's nonchalant-looking attack had not only severely wounded the man, it had even destroyed the armor treasure that he was wearing. This made the spatial tempering cultivators' hearts sink even further, and they felt as if they had been plunged into a glacial pit. Master Azure Dragon's eyelids twitched slightly upon seeing this, but thinking back to how Han Li had once faced several body integration stage beings on his own, he was unable to muster up the courage to directly confront Han Li. "Brother Han, you've just attacked a prized disciple of Elder Gu from the panel of elders. I'm afraid you'll have to give Elder Gu an explanation for this," he said after clearing his throat in an awkward manner. "Why do I need to explain things to him? If Elder Gu has a problem, he can come to see me. Speaking of explanations, I believe you owe me on." Han Li chuckled coldly without displaying any intention of letting this matter slide. Rather than make any attempt to argue his case, Master Azure Dragon admitted, "I didn't intend for things to be like. I had thought that you had already passed away, so I wanted to take fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix for myself. Seeing as you're alive and well, I'll be sure to pay you a visit at a later date to deliver a formal apology." "You think an apology will suffice? I took a great risk to go to Heavenly City to assist you, yet this is how you decide to repay me. If I don't make an example out of you, how can I expect anyone else in the city to respect me?" Han Li asked in a frosty voice. Master Azure Dragon was beginning to lose his temper upon hearing this, and he also adopted a more aggressive stance. "What do you want from me, then? Do you want to fight me?" "Sure, I'd be happy to oblige with that request. You dared to try and walk all over my authority, so you must be quite confident in your own abilities. Let me see if you have what it takes to back up your actions." Han Li chuckled coldly without any hesitation. Master Azure Dragon's expression darkened even further upon hearing this. Han Li didn't have any intention of wasting time with words. He swept both sleeves through the air, and several tens of small azure swords shot forth in a frenzy. At the same time, golden light flashed from his body, and he released a burst of astonishing spiritual pressure directly toward Master Azure Dragon. Master Azure Dragon was also unable to repress his fury any longer. He raised his hand with an enraged look on his face, and the white book that he was holding instantly spread open. Spiritual light of different colors flashed within the book, and it seemed that countless runes were about to emerge from within it. Xiao Hong and the others were naturally extremely alarmed by this turn of events, but they didn't dare to try and sneak away in fear of incurring Han Li's wrath. As such, they could disperse throughout the hall to get as far away from the two body integration cultivators as possible. They knew that this distance didn't grant them any safety in the face of a battle between body integration cultivators, but it offered them some internal solace. Han Li completely disregarded what they were doing and appraised Master Azure Dragon intently with a cold light in his eyes as he prepared to unleash his sword arts. Right at this moment, a streak of white light flew into the hall, then circled around in midair before landing right in between Han Li and Master Azure Dragon. A smiling humanoid figure then emerged from within the streak of white light. "Are you two really planning to demolish this pavilion of Elder Gus by battling here? Please do me a favor and allow me to mediate for the two of you." This was a benevolent elderly man wearing a golden cassia. It was none other than Buddhist monk Jin Yue. "Long time no see, fellow Taoist Jin Yue. Have you been well?" Han Li fully intended to continue in his assault, but he could only forcibly repress his fury for now. After all, he was on relatively good terms with Buddhist monk Jin Yue, so he couldn't just afford him no consideration at all. Master Azure Dragon was naturally very relieved to see the arrival of Buddhist monk Jin Yue. He was well aware of just how fearsome Han Li was, so he naturally wanted to avoid a battle. It was just that Han Li was insulting him in front of these juniors, so he had to protect his own pride and reputation. He immediately cupped his fist a polite salute toward the monk and said, "Forgive me for not coming out to greet you, fellow Taoist Jin Yue. I received news that fellow Taoist Han had returned to the city, so I immediately set off to come here. Thankfully, I managed to get here in time before the situation escalated any further. I notified two of the fellow Taoists who just so happened to be nearby on my way here, so they should arrive soon as well. Please allow the three of us to mediate this conflict. After all, we are in the midst of a devilish tribulation, and both of you are top-grade powerful beings of the city, So any conflict between the two of you could affect the internal stability of the city. Isn't that right, fellow Taoist Gu? Buddhist monk Jin Yue suddenly turned toward the entrance of the hall with a meaningful expression as he spoke. I really must thank you, fellow Taoist Jin Yue. If you hadn't stepped in, perhaps my origin pocket pavilion would cease to exist from this day forth. A burst of hearty laughter rang out, following which a gray humanoid figure appeared outside the door without any warning. It was a gray-robed, elderly man with a dark complexion. Fellow Taoist Gu, Han Li was immediately able to identify this man as the owner of the Origin Pocket Pavilion, whom he'd met on several previous occasions. It's fantastic to see that you've made a safe return, fellow Taoist Han. You have to come pay me a visit when you have some spare time. I really am very interested to hear how you managed to escape from a sacred ancestor, the gray-robed man said with a smile. Even though he had only met Han Li on a few fleeting occasions, he was speaking to Han Li as if they were old friends. You're speaking far too highly of me, Brother Gu. I only escaped from a scared ancestor clone. If a sacred ancestor's true body had come after me, there's no way I would have been able to escape, Han Li explained with a wry smile. Even so, it's still a testament of your powers that you were able to escape from a sacred ancestor clone, Brother Han, the gray-robed man countered with a shake of his head. Han Li naturally wasn't going to argue the issue any further, and he merely smiled before turning to Buddhist monk Jin Yue. Who's the other fellow Taoist you were referring to aside from Brother Gu, fellow Taoist Jin Yue? Rest assured, fellow Taoist Han. It's an acquaintance of yours, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said with a smile. An acquaintance of mine. Han Li's eyes narrowed lightly upon hearing this, and a certain person instantly sprang into his mind. Master Azure Dragon cleared his throat and was just about to say something when silver light suddenly flashed outside. A streak of silver light flew into the hall, then faded to reveal a silver-robed woman. Woman was none other than Fairy Silverlight, and an elated look immediately appeared on her face at the sight of Han Li. Brother Han, your powers have progressed significantly again. I must congratulate you. After the battle at Heavenly City, I was pursued by a devilish lord and encountered some additional unexpected troubles, so I only recently made it back to the city as well. Han Li faltered slightly before a smile appeared on his face. Long time no see, fellow Taoist Silverlight. All right, seeing as everyone's here, let's all take a seat and discuss the matter at hand, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said. You're asking me to take a seat with fellow Taoist Azure Dragon. I'll pass. I have no interest in wasting any further time with the likes of him, Han Li said with a cold expression. Master Azure Dragon's expression darkened even further upon hearing this. How dare you insult me like this? If you want a fight, then I'll give you a fight, he yelled in a furious voice. I'm more than happy to oblige, Han Li replied without any hesitation, and azure light flashed from his body as he prepared to resume the battle. Hold on, fellow Taoists. Please listen to what I have to say. Fellow Taoist Silver Light may not be aware of the details behind this, but fellow Taoist Gu and I are both aware of what's been going on. It's just that the devilish army has recently increased the intensity of their assault against the city, so we haven't had a chance to step in. Come to think of it, we really must apologize to you, fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix, Buddhist Master Jin Yue said in an apologetic manner as he hurriedly stepped in again. The Ice Phoenix was indeed rather displeased with Buddhist monk Jin Yue and the other elders, but she displayed no sign of this. Instead, she replied in a respectful manner, Azure Dragon is the one behind this. It has nothing to do with you or anyone else, senior. Buddhist monk Jin Yue shook his head as he replied in an earnest manner, I may not be directly responsible for this, but as an elder of Deep Heaven City, I certainly can't shake off all responsibility. However, seeing as Azure Dragon is now also an elder of the city, I hope that you can let things slide, Brother Han. After all, Benefactor Azure Dragon did indeed do something wrong, but he hasn't caused any harm to fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix. How about we get fellow Taoist Azure Dragon to offer some spirit stones to Fairy Ice Phoenix as compensation? As for the sum of the spirit stones, I'll make sure that it's satisfactory to fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix. Do you think I'll be in need of spirit stones, fellow Taoist? Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. You naturally won't be in need of spirit stones, but I'm sure they'll be greatly welcomed for fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix. Of course, if you have some other conditions, you can state them as well, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said. After pondering this proposition for a moment, Han Li didn't give an immediate response. Instead, he turned to the other two body integration stage elders and asked, Brother Gu, fellow Taoist Silver Light, what do you think? I normally wouldn't offer my opinion in something like this, but in the face of the pressure exerted on the city by the devilish army, I also hope that the two of you can set aside your differences to ensure the internal cohesion of the city isn't disrupted. Elder Gu replied in a slightly ambiguous manner. And Lee displayed no reaction to this wily, as he turned toward Fairy Silver Light. I only recently returned to the city, but I have some things about this, and I also think that fellow Taoist Azure Dragon has gone too far. However, every body integration cultivator is an extremely precious resource to the city, so I wouldn't want to see a battle between you two, either. Having said that, I don't think spirit stones alone will be enough as compensation. I suggest fellow Taoist Azure Dragon offer fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix some additional treasures or materials that she requires as well, Fairy Silver Light suggested, and it was quite clear that she was taking Han Li's side. HMPH, so all three of you are convinced that I'm in the wrong here, Master Azure Dragon harumphed coldly. I'm sure you know better than anyone else whether you're at fault, fellow Taoist. Are you going to make us find evidence against you? If so, we have some right here. Buddhist monk Jin Yue's expression also darkened slightly as he turned toward Xiao Hong's group in a calm manner. Xiao Hong and the others all lowered their heads upon hearing this and didn't dare to respond. Finally, Han Li turned to the Ice Phoenix and asked, "What do you think, fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix?" "With so many seniors present, it's not in my place to say anything. I'll let you make the decision, Brother Han," Ice Phoenix replied. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he contemplated the matter for the moment before continuing. "In that case, setting aside the aforementioned spirit stones and treasures, I have another condition. If he agrees, then I'll let things slide for now." "What's your condition, fellow Taoist Han?" Buddhist monk Jin Yue asked. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D633, letter 1D626, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 212F, letter 1D624, letter 1D45C, letter 1D62E. It's very simple. I can't say that I'm rolling in wealth, but I'm certainly not missing spirit stones and treasures. My condition is for fellow Taoist Azure Dragon to take 3 attacks of mine without evading. After that, I'll let things slide, Han Li said as a cold look flashed through his eyes. "What, you still want to fight, Brother Han?" Buddhist monk Jin Yue was rather alarmed to hear this. "It's not a fight. I'm only asking him to take 3 attacks from me. I think it would be more apt to refer to it as a sparring match," Han Li countered in an indifferent manner. After discussing this with Fairy Silver Light and Elder Gu for a short while, Buddhist monk Jin Yue turned to Master Azure Dragon. "What do you think of this, fellow Taoist Azure Dragon?" Master Azure Dragon hesitated momentarily before asking in a cautious manner, "Is the usage of treasures permitted? Cultivators like you and me rely heavily on our treasures, so their usage is naturally permitted. What's the problem? We're both of the same cultivation base. Are you so unconfident in your own abilities that you don't even dare to take 3 attacks from me?" Han Li asked with a hint of mockery in his voice. Master Azure Dragon hesitated momentarily before finally giving a cold harumph. "HMPH, there's no need to goad me. I agree to your condition." Just as Han Li had said, if he didn't even dare to take 3 attacks from another cultivator of the same cultivation base, then his reputation in Deep Heaven City would be swept to the ground. "Good. Seeing as you have no objections either, let's find a place and settle this matter as quickly as possible. I don't want to waste any more time than is necessary on something like this," Han Li said with a cold look in his eyes. "Sure, you pick the place," Master Azure Dragon replied without any hesitation. "There should be a designated sparring venue here, right, fellow Taoist Gu?" Han Li asked as he turned toward the gray-robed elderly man. "Of course. Our Origin Pocket Pavilion has a private space established in a spatial rift. Even a body integration stage battle in the rift wouldn't affect the outside world, so it'll be perfect to facilitate your sparring match," Elder Gu replied. Buddhist monk Jin Yue's eyelids twitched slightly in response to the 3-attack agreement that had just been forged. All of the elders of the city had heard from Fairy Silver Light that Han Li was far more powerful than cultivators of the same cultivation base, and had even managed to kill several devilish lords in succession. But if it were only 3 attacks, then Master Azure Dragon should be able to handle it. Otherwise, one could only say that Master Azure Dragon was nowhere near as powerful as his reputation suggested, and there would be no need for the panel of elders to continue protecting him at the risk of offending Han Li. After thinking through all of this, Buddhist monk Jin Yue tried his hand at persuasion again, but could only give up with a wry smile when his efforts failed to bear fruit. As for Fairy Silver Light and Elder Gu, the former was on Han Li's side, while the other didn't want to offend either side, so they naturally raised no objections either. Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D633, letter 212F, letter 212F, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D4B7, letter 1D450, letter 2134, letter 1D4FA. Thus, they were led out of the hall by Elder Gu. However, just before departing, Han Li suddenly turned toward Xiao Hong and the others, and said in a cold voice, "If I don't see you at my abode at the same time tomorrow, hee, I'm sure you know the consequences that await you." After that, he strode out of the hall, and none of Xiao Hong's group dared to say anything in response. As for Buddhist monk Jin Yue and the others, they merely pretended not to have heard anything and didn't even look at Xiao Hong's group before departing. Master Azure Dragon took an expressionless glance at them before his departure, but didn't say anything in the end. Following the departure of Han Li and the others, a demonic cultivator with dense black fur all over his face immediately turned to Xiao Hong with a depressed expression. "What do we do, Fairy Xiao? Senior Azure Dragon seems to have no intention of standing up for us." "This is not what we agreed upon initially, fellow Taoist. You told us that Senior Azure Dragon had assured you that Senior Han had already passed away, and that Senior Azure Dragon would stand up for us, so there's no risk involved. I believe you owe us an explanation." Another human cultivator chimed in an urgent manner. The other remained silent, but all of them were also looking at Xiao Hong. "HMPH, do you think I can be exempt from all of this? I merely passed on Senior Azure Dragon's promise to all of you. How would I know that he would be so wary of Senior Han that he doesn't even dare to stand up for us? It's a good thing that all of us have powerful backers so that man couldn't just kill us on the spot. Having said that, we're definitely going to be punished tomorrow." Xiao Hong snapped in the face of all of the accusatory eyes being directed at her. "So you're saying we really do have to visit Senior Han tomorrow?" someone said in a hesitant manner. "HMPH, I suggest you don't try to run away. If you do that, Senior Han really will have a reason to kill us. When that time comes, even our seniors won't be able to protect us," Xiao Hong harumphed coldly. "You're right, fellow Taoist Xiao. Senior Han has most likely already planted spiritual sense marks within our bodies without our detection, so trying to escape would be akin to committing suicide. Besides, the devilish army has already surrounded Deep Heaven City. Where can we even go? I suggest you all set aside any funny ideas you're hatching and do as Senior Han instructs tomorrow. I have to inform one of my seniors of this, so I'll be taking my leave now." One of the more mature cultivators sighed before departing with a concerned look on his face. The rest of the group couldn't think of any alternatives, either, so they could only depart in a gloomy manner as well. Thus, Xiao Hong was the only one left in the hall. She sat in her seat with furrowed brows for a long while, and her expression changed several times as she explored different potential alternatives in her mind. But in the end, she also stomped her foot and departed in a resigned manner. As for everyone else, they had all gone back, either to prepare lavish presents or to seek out their backers. At this point, Han Li and the others had already been led by Elder Gu to an even larger hall on the highest level of the pavilion. Han Li was currently appraising a small formation that had been set up at the direct center of the hall, and Elder Gu strode toward the formation before making a hand seal to cast several profound incantation seals into it. The spiritual light formed by the incantation seals vanished into the formation in a flash, following which the formation was activated amid a loud buzzing sound. Only then did Elder Gu turn to everyone else with a smile and said, "We can get to the sparring venue through this teleportation formation. Please follow me, fellow Taoists. This formation will be able to teleport all of us into the venue at once." "Sure," Han Li replied with a smile before drifting to the center of the formation. With his current level of powers, a spatial rift wasn't going to be enough to trap him, so he naturally had no inhibitions. Master Azure Dragon was unwilling to display any weakness, and he also flew into the formation as a ball of azure light. Buddhist monk Jin Yue shook his head in a resigned manner before following suit, and he was followed by the Ice Phoenix, whose brows were tightly furrowed. Elder Gu and Fairy Silver Light were the last ones to enter the formation, and as soon as the former stepped into the formation, he immediately made a hand seal. Five-colored light was instantly released by the formation before enveloping everyone, and Han Li felt his surroundings blur before he appeared in an unfamiliar place. He swept his gaze through the surrounding area to find that this was quite a large space that spanned several thousand acres in area. As was the case with all spatial rifts, the area was surrounded by murky gray spatial walls. There was a tall platform that had a diameter of over 1,000 feet at the center of the space, and there was faint spiritual light shimmering from the platform, clearly indicating that it had been fortified through the use of restriction. There were also a dozen or so stone pillars standing around the platform, each of which was over 100 feet tall. There were extremely intricate patterns engraved on the surfaces of these pillars, and there were also top-grade spirit stones embedded into them as well, creating quite a lavish sight to behold. Fairy Silverlight was immediately able to identify the formation, and she exclaimed, "This is the heavenly bipolar formation. You sure made a heavy investment into this place, Brother Gu. With this formation in place, it'll indeed be very difficult for a body integration stage battle to affect the outside world." A hint of surprise also appeared on Buddhist monk Jin Yue's face. You're far too kind, fellow Taoist Silver Light. I have to test out some abilities and cultivation arts from time to time, so I decided to make this investment." Elder Gu was speaking in a modest manner, but there was a hint of smugness in his eyes. And Li appraised this setup through narrowed eyes for a moment before flying onto the platform as a streak of azure light. The azure light faded in midair, and Han Li was revealed again before turning toward Master Azure Dragon with a cold expression. "Do I need to invite you onto this platform, fellow Taoist Azure Dragon?" Master Azure Dragon's expression darkened as he harumphed coldly, and he abruptly stepped forward, upon which his body was hoisted up into the air by a burst of azure chi. He drifted lightly over to the platform, then descended upon it across from Han Li. Elder Gu immediately flipped a hand over to produce a silver jade plate upon seeing this, then tossed it toward the platform. The jade plate transformed into a silver ball of light that hovered high up in the air, and Elder Gu pointed a finger at it from afar while chanting an incantation. A loud rumbling boom rang out, and piercing light erupted from the spirit stones embedded onto the stone pillars. At the same time, a pillar of light shot forth from the top of each stone pillar before converging toward the silver ball of light. In the next instant, the silver ball of light exploded, releasing specks of silver light that transformed into a dense light barrier that encompassed the entire platform. Not only was the light barrier shimmering with silver light, there were countless white runes surging out of it, basking the entire stone platform in a mysterious white glow. "All right, the restriction is ready. We won't be affected no matter how fierce their battle becomes now," Elder Gu said as he turned to Buddhist monk Jin Yue with a smile. "Thank you, fellow Taoist Gu. Hopefully, this is going to be nothing more than a casual sparring match," Buddhist monk Jin Yue said in a concerned manner. "Rest assured, fellow Taoist, if it's only 3 attacks, then fellow Taoist Azure Dragon will definitely be able to endure it. I'm sure both of them will be displaying their true power during this sparring match. I'm very much looking forward to this. In particular, I heard that fellow Taoist Han has killed several devilish lords. I'm sure he'll put on a spectacular display for us," Elder Gu said with a faint smile. Buddhist monk Jin Yue merely heaved another resigned sigh in response. As for the Ice Phoenix, she was appraising Han Li with a concerned look on her face. "Are you ready? Here I come," Han Li said in a cold voice as a hint of baleful aura began to emanate from his body. Almost at the exact same moment, he clenched his fists, and a loud thunderclap rang out. Golden lightning erupted from his arms, then converged to form a pair of menacing golden lightning pythons that sprang up into the air. "Divine Devilbane Lightning. HMPH, I'm not a Devil Dao cultivator. What is that lightning going to do to me?" Master Azure Dragon harumphed coldly as he raised his hand, and a clear ringing sound erupted from the book that he was holding. It then transformed into a 5-colored light barrier before him, and immediately thereafter he flipped his hands over to summon a pair of giant brushes, one golden and one silver, each of which was around 10 feet in length. Despite what he was saying, he didn't dare to treat Han Li with any complacency and immediately summoned his bonded treasures. And Li remained completely expressionless as he swept both sleeves through the air to release 72 small azure swords, which then combined as one at his behest to form a giant azure sword that was over 100 feet in length. He then pointed toward the 2 golden lightning pythons from afar, and a rumbling thunderclap rang out as the 2 pythons abruptly pounced toward the giant sword before vanishing into it in a flash. The giant azure sword instantly swelled to over 1,000 feet in size, and countless arcs of golden lightning erupted from within it in a frenzy. However, that wasn't all. Han Li looked up at the huge sword before opening his mouth to expel a ball of silver flames, and as soon as it emerged, the silver fireball transformed into a silver fire raven. The fire raven flapped its wings and swelled drastically to around 10 feet in size, before also flying toward the massive sword like a speeding arrow. In the next instant, a layer of silver flames appeared over the surface of the entire giant sword, following which Han Li uttered the word slash. As soon as his voice trailed off, the massive sword immediately came crashing down toward Master Azure Dragon. It wasn't descending very quickly, but it was radiating a scorching aura that instantly turned the space down below red hot, as if it had been set alight. Master Azure Dragon's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and bright light erupted from the tips of his two brushes, following which countless ancient runes surged forth in a frenzy. All of the runes were shimmering with spiritual light, and they combined as one before sweeping upward as a burst of golden and silver light. A loud thunderclap rang out as the giant sword clashed with the golden and silver light, and virtually the entire platform was inundated by golden lightning and silver flames. The explosion of scintillating light forced the onlookers to look away, as bursts of shockwaves erupted forth in all directions. The stone platform tremored violently, and ripples ran along the surface of the silver light barrier overhead, as if it were about to crack at any moment. All of the spectating cultivators drew a sharp breath upon seeing this. Han Li's first attack was far more powerful than they had anticipated, and Elder Gu's expression changed slightly as he immediately flicked his fingers through the air, casting a series of incantation seals toward the surrounding stone pillars. These incantation seals transformed into streaks of light that vanished into the pillars in a flash, and the pillars of light stemming from the tops of the pillars became around twice as thick as before, fortifying the light barrier so that it became as solid as it originally had been. As a result, the stone platform also instantly recovered its stability. Moments later, the scintillating light encompassing the entire stone platform finally faded, and Han Li and Master Azure Dragon were revealed again. Han Li had his hands clasped in an expressionless manner, and he was still hovering at the exact same spot as before. In contrast, Master Azure Dragon had descended onto the stone platform. The five-colored light barrier before him had vanished, leaving only a tattered white book in its wake. At the same time, his two brushes had also dimmed significantly and seemed to have lost a lot of their spiritual nature. As for Master Azure Dragon himself, he appeared to be completely unscathed, but his face had turned quite pale, and it was clear that Han Li had gained the absolute upper hand. Buddhist monk Jin Yue and Elder Gu couldn't help but exchange a glance upon seeing this, and both of them could see their own astonishment mirrored in one another's eyes. They knew that Han Li was supposed to be more powerful than Master Azure Dragon, but it still came as quite a shock to them that he was able to force Master Azure Dragon down onto the ground with just a single attack. They couldn't help but wonder if Han Li were truly that unfathomably powerful, or if Master Azure Dragon were simply too weak. Han Li chuckled coldly as he waved a hand through the air, and spatial fluctuations erupted nearby, following which countless small azure swords emerged out of thin air before flying back into his body. He had gained the upper hand during that last clash, but the giant azure sword had been shattered, and he had no intention of using his flying swords for the second attack, so he naturally recovered all of them. Immediately thereafter, he made a hand seal, and his body began to swell drastically in size as a layer of golden fur appeared over his skin. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a giant golden ape that was several tens of feet tall. The giant ape was extremely menacing in appearance, and it let loose a thunderous roar as it thumped its own chest with its fists, then swelled even further to several 100 feet in stature. It turned toward Master Azure Dragon with a bone-chilling gaze, and Master Azure Dragon's expression changed slightly before he yelled in an enraged manner, "Do you think you're the only one with a transformation technique? Have a taste of my Azure Dragon avatar." As soon as his voice trailed off, he laid a hand onto the top of his own head, and a pillar of azure light erupted from his head before transforming into an Azure Dragon projection. He then swept a sleeve through the air to release 7 small black swords, all of which plunged into various parts of his body like lightning. Immediately thereafter, he opened his mouth to expel 7 balls of blood essence, all of which disappeared into the 7 swords. In the next instant, the 7 swords vanished, but countless crimson threads suddenly erupted from all over his body, binding around the Azure Dragon projection in a flash before abruptly pulling it downward. The Azure Dragon projection instantly combined as one with Master Azure Dragon, and he let loose a low roar as azure scales appeared all over his limbs and face. White light flashed above his head, and a pair of green horns emerged, while a giant azure tail sprouted out of his back. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a half-demon monster. I had heard that fellow Taoist azure dragon was a half-demon, so this transformation isn't all that remarkable. But what's this transformation technique that fellow Taoist Han is using? Buddhist monk Jin Yue asked with a curious expression. It doesn't seem like an ordinary transformation technique. Could it be that fellow Taoist Han also possesses true spirit blood? Elder Gu speculated. That doesn't sound very plausible. Fellow Taoist Han is an ascended cultivator, and true spirits have been extinct for countless years in the lower realms. There's no way that he could have inherited a true spirit bloodline, Fairy Silver Light said with a shake of her head. Perhaps fellow Taoist Han obtained the spirit blood after ascending to the spirit realm. In any case, the next attack is definitely going to be far more powerful than the last one. Fellow Taoist Gu, will the restriction be able to withstand the impact? Buddhist monk Jin Yue asked in a concerned manner. Rest assured, fellow Taoist, there won't be any issues, Elder Gu replied in a confident manner. I certainly hope so. Buddhist monk Jin Yue was clearly a lot less confident, but he didn't force the issue and fell silent as a wry smile appeared on his face. At this moment, the giant golden ape sprang into action. It made a grabbing motion with its giant furry hands, and a ball of spiritual light emerged within each of its hands. The balls of spiritual light then transformed into a pair of small mountains, one black and one azure, and it was clear that they were extraordinary treasures. Han Li let loose a deafening roar before violently hurling the pair of small mountains downward, and an explosive boom rang out as the mountains transformed into two streaks of light. The space before the two streaks of light warped violently, and a piercing whistling sound rang out as the mountains arrived right above Master Azure Dragon in a flash. Two enormous bursts of invisible force descended upon Master Azure Dragon, and the air immediately tightened around him, immobilizing him in the process. He was naturally very alarmed by this and immediately let loose a loud roar, upon which bright azure light erupted from his body. All of his scales also instantly stood up on end, and a burst of tremendous power surged out of his body, allowing him to recover his mobility. Immediately thereafter, he reached out with his dragon claws viciously toward the pair of descending mountains. Among all true dragons, the Azure Dragon's physical prowess ranked among the top 3. This Azure Dragon avatar of his couldn't compare with an actual Azure Dragon, but due to the fact the presence of the Azure Dragon bloodline within his body, his physical constitution was far more powerful than the average human. Not only was his entire body as resolute as a top-grade treasure, after activating his true dragon bloodline, he could attain a part of the Azure Dragon's enormous power. However, in the instant that his claws came into contact with the pair of mountains, he immediately regretted his decision. He had thought that his claws would have been able to crush the pair of mountains into rubble, but instead, it was his claws that were shattered by the mountains. He immediately withdrew his arms like lightning, then opened his mouth to expel a ball of azure light. The ball of light struck one of the mountains while he swept his tail toward the other mountain like a giant whip. Two resounding booms and a muffled groan rang out, and Master Azure Dragon flew back like a tossed rag, backtracking over 10 steps before just barely managing to steady himself. An astonished look had appeared on his face, and he opened his mouth to say something, only to throw up a mouthful of black blood instead. With the recent improvement in Han Li's power, his giant mountain ape transformation was now far more fearsome than back in the Battle of Heavenly City. Even if his strength couldn't compare with that of an actual giant mountain ape, he still possesses around 30% to 40% of its strength, and that, in conjunction with the two extreme mountains, was far too much for Master Azure Dragon to handle. Thus, he was immediately sent flying by the pair of mountains. If it weren't for the fact that he had instinctively withdrawn his hands in time and summoned a treasure to save himself, not only would his fingers have been shattered, his arms would have been snapped as well. Even so, excruciating pain was spearing through all of his meridians, and he was unable to muster up most of his magic power. Right at this moment, a ferocious light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he abruptly stepped, covering a distance of over 1,000 feet in a single step, thereby taking him to only several tens of feet away from Master Azure Dragon. Third attack. Han Li's cold voice rang out, and his giant furry fist was thrust violently through the air. Master Azure Dragon's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he immediately tried to unleash some type of cultivation art to take evasive measures, only for a bone-chilling harumph to suddenly ring out in his heart. Master Azure Dragon felt as if a thunderclap had erupted right within his ears, and a sharp pain stabbed into his mind. He gave a muffled groan, and was rendered completely unable to muster up any magic power. Meanwhile, an astonishing baleful aura erupted from Han Li's body, as his giant golden fist hurtled directly toward Master Azure Dragon's head. Even before the fist had struck its target, Master Azure Dragon was struck by a sense of asphyxiation from the enormous pressure it was giving off. With Han Li's incredible strength in his giant ape form, Master Azure Dragon's head would definitely be pulverized by this punch, even in his half-demon form. Master Azure Dragon was still reeling from Han Li's spirit-stunned thorn, so he was completely unable to evade or defend himself, and a horrified look appeared on his face. However, as a body integration cultivator, he naturally had a few life-saving trump cards up his sleeve. White light flashed, and a translucent shield flew out of his body before positioning itself in front of him. At the same time, all of his scales instantly shrank to form a suit of azure armor that encased his entire body. These 2 layers of defenses were more than enough against the average body integration cultivator's attacks, but they were destroyed with ease by the giant ape's golden fist. Golden light flashed as the translucent shield was shattered amid a resounding boom, following which the golden fist struck the suit of azure armor. All of a sudden, an azure dragon projection erupted forth and pounced directly toward the golden fist, but right at this moment, the giant fist transformed into a golden vortex that was around 10 feet in size. The vortex released a burst of incredible tearing force, and the azure dragon projection was instantly torn to shreds. In the instant that the projection was vanquished, the suit of azure armor also crumbled away. The golden vortex then reverted back into a giant golden fist that hurtled directly toward Master Azure Dragon's head, and the killing intent imbued within it was detectable even to the cultivators outside the light barrier. Master Azure Dragon's face had become deathly pale under the illumination of the golden light being released by the fist. "Fellow Taoist Han, no. Stop, Brother Han." All of the cultivators outside the light barrier immediately cried out in a horrified manner. In the next instant, the giant golden fist glanced past Master Azure Dragon's ear before striking the stone platform behind him. What everyone had failed to notice was that a hair-thin object had shot forth out of the golden fist and instantly vanished into Master Azure Dragon's ear just as it was passing by his face. The entire stone platform tremored violently, and a giant crater that was around 10 feet deep appeared, while the surface of the restriction flashed violently with spiritual light. Master Azure Dragon's face was completely devoid of color, and he could only stare in silence as the giant ape slowly withdrew its fist. Everyone outside the light barrier heaved a collective sigh of relief upon seeing this. Han Li reverted back to his human form amid a flash of golden light, then turned to Master Azure Dragon with undisguised killing intent in his eyes. "I don't care how you came to Deep Heaven City and how you became an elder. I don't want to see you here 3 days from now. If you haven't left Deep Heaven City by then, I suggest you pick a burial site for yourself." After that, Han Li flew off the stone platform as a streak of azure light before landing beside the Ice Phoenix. Buddhist monk Jin Yue hurriedly tried to say something, but Han Li cupped his fist in a salute and said, "Fellow Taoists, I've done everything I came here to do. I only just returned to the city and have some matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave now." As soon as his voice trailed off, he swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light, which swept up both the Ice Phoenix and himself, then carried them both over to the teleportation formation. Following a burst of rumbling from the formation, both of them vanished. Han Li hadn't given Buddhist monk Jin Yue and Elder Gu any chance to try and mediate the situation. Before the two had a chance to say anything, Han Li and the Ice Phoenix had already left. Elder Gu was silent for a long while before turning to Buddhist monk Jin Yue with a wry smile. "Looks like fellow Taoist Han wasn't joking. Benefactor Han has gone too far here. No matter what differences there are between them, Master Azure Dragon is already an elder of our city. How can he leave Deep Heaven City just because fellow Taoist Han told him to? Rest assured, fellow Taoist Azure Dragon, I'll visit fellow Taoist Han with a few other fellow Taoists to convince him not to take such drastic measures," Buddhist monk Jin Yue said with a shake of his head. Only then did Master Azure Dragon return to his senses, and his face was still completely devoid of color as he shook his head in response. There's no need for that. I lost a fellow Taoist Han. Even if he didn't ask me to leave, I would be too ashamed to remain in the city. I'll leave the city tomorrow and will no longer be an elder. Thankfully, not many people knew that I had joined the city, so my departure won't cause much of a disturbance. After that, he vanished from the stone platform as a ball of azure light, then also teleported out of this space using the teleportation formation. Buddhist monk Jin Yue and Elder Gu exchanged a glance, and both of them were temporarily rendered speechless. Looks like fellow Taoist Azure Dragon has been dealt a heavy blow, Elder Gu sighed. His reaction makes sense. Conflict has already arisen between him and fellow Taoist Han, and he's clearly no match for fellow Taoist Han's powers. If I were in his place, I would also leave the city, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said in a resigned manner. Are we really just going to allow a mid-body integration cultivator to leave our deep heaven city? That will be a massive loss to the panel of elders. Fellow Taoist Han may be far more powerful than fellow Taoist Azure Dragon, but he has no intention of joining the panel of elders, Elder Gu said in a hesitant voice. Let's visit the other fellow Taoists and see if we can come up with a way to keep him. Having said that, with the devilish army piling so much pressure on the city, fellow Taoist Han is more important to our city at the moment. Besides, Azure Dragon has already developed a sense of fear and wariness toward fellow Taoist Han. I think it's going to be very difficult to change his mind, Buddhist monk Jin Yue sighed. In any case, we still have to give it a try. I'll contact the other fellow Taoists and invite them here right away, Elder Gu said as he flipped a hand over to summon a stack of voice transmissions talismans. Buddhist monk Jin Yue merely nodded in agreement as a contemplative look appeared on his face. Meanwhile, Han Li was taking the Ice Phoenix back to his abode. Han Li flew on ahead with his hands clasped behind his back, looking into the distance in silence. The Ice Phoenix was situated behind him with a complex expression, and she didn't say anything either. Several hours later, the streak of azure light returned to the top floor of the stone pagoda. Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan were beginning to grow rather impatient from waiting, and they immediately extended ecstatic bows toward Han Li upon witnessing his return with the Ice Phoenix. Master Senior Ice Phoenix, welcome back. Did you have a smooth trip, Master? Hai Yueshan asked in an excited manner. I did. You two can go and rest now. I have some things that I'd like to discuss with fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix in private, Han Li instructed. Yes, Master. Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan immediately gave an affirmative response before departing after extending another respectful bow. Thus, Han Li and the Ice Phoenix were only ones left in the hall. Please take a seat, fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix. That must have been quite the ordeal for you, Han Li said with a smile as he sat down on the main seat. Thank you, Brother Han. Indeed, I thought I was done for. Never did I think that a body integration cultivator like Azure Dragon would do something so brazen and underhanded, the Ice Phoenix said with a wry smile as she sat down beside Han Li. Under normal circumstances, perhaps he would be more inclined to uphold his reputation, but in the midst of this devilish tribulation, he's naturally willing to cast all that aside for the opportunity to become more powerful. I'm guessing that if he weren't wary of me, he most likely would have gone after you even earlier than this, Han Li replied. Is Azure Dragon really going to leave Deep Heaven City? Even if he were willing, surely the panel of elders wouldn't be willing to let him go. After all, a mid-body integration cultivator is currently an extremely prized asset to Deep Heaven City, the Ice Phoenix said in a concerned manner. A prized asset? He couldn't even take 3 attacks from me. Do you think the panel of elders will actually hold him in high regard? Under normal circumstances, the panel of elders will perhaps exert pressure on me to prevent this from happening to maintain their authority. But now that the devilish army has surrounded the city, I'm sure they know who's more important to the city between Azure Dragon and myself. I'm guessing that they'll send some people to try and persuade Azure Dragon to stay as a mere formality, then let him go when he insists on leaving, Han Li said with a nonchalant smile. You're right, the panel of elders wouldn't dare to do anything to antagonize you at a time like this. However, that Azure Dragon is undoubtedly going to be extremely resentful toward you. You'll have to be wary of him in the future. Of course, you won't have anything to fear, but he could target your disciples, the Ice Phoenix cautioned. It's all right, Azure Dragon won't trouble anyone ever again, Han Li replied with a mysterious smile. What, you don't mean? With the Ice Phoenix's intelligence, she was naturally immediately able to read between the lines, and her heart jolted with shock. He's a very petty man. I'm not going to allow such a toxic enemy to live on in this world. Otherwise, who knows what troubles could arise in the future, Han Li said in a cold voice. I'm sure you're more than powerful enough to put an end to Azure Dragon's life, but surely the panel of elders won't allow you to do something like this. Besides, no matter how discreetly you do this, the panel of elders will still suspect you for foul play, the Ice Phoenix said in a hesitant manner. I won't do this in the city, and I'll have someone else take him out in my stead, Han Li replied with a faint smile. A hint of surprise appeared on the Ice Phoenix's face before she hurriedly cautioned, You have an ally who's capable of doing this. Please do exercise caution, Brother Han. That Azure Dragon may be no match for you, but he's still a mid-body integration cultivator. It'll most likely be very difficult for other people to kill him. Rest assured, fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix, I'll make sure that the job gets done, Han Li replied in a confident manner, then swept a sleeve through the air to release a ball of yellow light, which then transformed into a little girl who appeared to be around 2 or 3 years of age. The little girl had fair skin and a pair of large black eyes that were extremely adorable to behold. Go and keep an eye on Azure Dragon. If I'm not mistaken, he'll most likely leave the city before the 3-day time limit runs out. Follow him out of the city, then put an end to him in a secluded location, Han Li instructed. The little girl's lips didn't move, but a tender female voice suddenly rang out in the hall. You make it sound so simple. I can keep an eye on him with no issues. With my current powers, I can conceal myself even from the average late-body integration cultivator. However, I don't think I have the power to put an end to his life. I only just went through metamorphosis, so my powers won't outstrip his by much. Master Azure Dragon has already been wounded by me. Even if he immediately takes pills to try and recover, he won't be able to make a full recovery anytime soon. On top of that, I planted something in his body so he'll only be able to unleash around 30% of his powers at most. In his current state, you'll be more than enough to put an end to him, Han Li said with a hint of a smile on his face. Oh, in that case, I don't have any further issues. The little girl gave an adorable smile before vanishing on the spot amid a flash of golden light. Brother Han, who was that? Ice Phoenix couldn't help but ask. That was a spirit beast of mine. It only underwent metamorphosis recently, Han Li replied. Your spirit beast? From the sounds of it, it also seems to be at the body integration stage, the Ice Phoenix said with a stunned expression. It is indeed at the early body integration stage, but it's inherited some of the bloodline of the true spirit Kirin, so even the average mid-body integration cultivator won't be a match for it, Han Li replied in a truthful manner. A wry smile appeared on the Ice Phoenix's face upon hearing this. I finally understand why you're not concerned about repercussions from the panel of elders now. With that spirit beast to assist you, you're most likely the undisputed number cultivator of Deep Heaven City. I wouldn't dare to claim such a title. Deep Heaven City has protected the human and demon races for hundreds of thousands of years. Surely you don't think that the city is only as powerful as it appears on the surface, fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix. Who knows how many powerful cultivators there are lurking beneath the surface? Han Li replied with a solemn shake of his head. Oh, have you heard some rumors, Brother Han? The Ice Phoenix asked in a surprised manner. No, I'm merely speculating. All right, let's not dwell on this topic any longer. Everything will be made clear once the devilish army officially commences their attack on the city, but prior to that, I'm going to require your assistance, fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix, Han Li said with a serious expression. The Ice Phoenix faltered slightly upon hearing this before a thought immediately occurred to her, and a faint blush appeared on her face. Are you referring to? That's right. I encountered some peril during my trip, but also some opportunities as well, and I can begin attempting a breakthrough to the late-body integration stage, so I'll have to borrow your heavenly phoenix origin Yin Qi, Han Li confirmed. The blush of the Ice Phoenix's face quickly faded, and she said in a solemn manner, If you hadn't stepped in to save me, I would have been reduced to a mere spirit beast, and there's certainly no way I could have reached the spatial tempering stage so quickly, so it's only right for me to repay you for your kindness. When do you plan to go into seclusion, Brother Han? If I had full confidence in my ability to break through this bottleneck, I wouldn't have asked this of you. If I can succeed in my breakthrough, you'll definitely be the most significant contributor. As for when I'm going into seclusion, that answer to that would naturally be as soon as possible. Once the leopard Kirin beast returns, I'll go into seclusion right away, Han Li replied. The Ice Phoenix nodded in response. Thus, the two of them chatted for a while longer before the Ice Phoenix stood up to depart. Han Li accompanied her out of the hall, then returned to his cultivation chamber to meditate. At the same time, Master Azure Dragon was seated on a wooden chair in the hall of a small stone pagoda that was around 1,000 feet tall. His face was quite pale, and he was surrounded by a dozen or so cultivators, all of whom seemed to possess powerful cultivation bases. Not far away from Master Azure Dragon sat a beautiful female cultivator, who appeared to be around 27 to 28 years of age. She was none other than the only other remaining body integration cultivator of Heavenly and City, Fairy Lin Luan. She could sense Master Azure Dragon's severely weakened aura, and she heaved a faint forlorn sigh. Have you really decided to go to the Holy Sovereign City, fellow Taoist Azure Dragon? We are the only remaining grand elders of our four great sects. If you leave now, I'll truly be all alone in this city. I don't want to leave either, but that man is forcing me to go, so I have no choice. You've seen him in action. Even if we were to join forces against him, we still most likely wouldn't be a match for him, Master Azure Dragon said as a hint of resentment flashed through his eyes. Why did you insist on pursuing that Fairy Ice Phoenix, fellow Taoist Azure Dragon? I've always been rather curious about this. She is indeed quite a beauty, but surely that's not enough to make you take such a huge risk. I know you're not a promiscuous individual. Is there some other reason behind this? Fairy Lin Luan asked with furrowed brows. There are indeed some reasons that I can't reveal, but there's no point in talking about this now. I'm going to leave tonight so that bastard has no opportunity to hunt me down before I go. If it weren't for the fact that I intend to leave my disciples to you, I wasn't planning to tell anyone about this, Master Azure Dragon said with a wry smile. Our four great sects have always been a unified entity. Even if you hadn't said anything, I would have still looked after the disciples of your 9-star sect in your stead. I'm sure the elders of the city wouldn't stoop to oppressing these juniors. Come to think of it, it may not be a bad thing that you're going to the Holy Sovereign City. This way, we can avoid putting all of our eggs in one basket, and if something happens to either of us, the other can preserve the heritage of our four great sects, Fairy Lin Luan said after a brief silence. I had those considerations in mind as well. All right, I won't delay here any longer. I'll be taking my leave now, and I'll leave you with all of my disciples except for 2 of them. Listen up, during my absence, all of you must follow fellow Taoist Lin's instructions. Understood? Master Azure Dragon instructed as he rose to his feet. Yes, Grand Elder, the dozen or so disciples replied in unison. Master Azure Dragon nodded before cupping his fist in a salute toward Lin Luan, then immediately departed, followed by 2 of his disciples. Lin Luan looked on at the trio's departing figures and shook her head in a forlorn manner. Several hours later, Master Azure Dragon and his 2 disciples arrived at the teleportation hall of Deep Heaven City, and the guards immediately rushed out to greet him. We pay our respects to Elder Azure Dragon. May I ask why you've come here, Elder? The spatial tempering stage leader of the guards asked in a respectful manner. He was clearly aware of the fact that Master Azure Dragon had already become an elder of Deep Heaven City. Activate the teleportation formation right away. I have to leave the city to do something, Master Azure Dragon instructed in an implacable voice. What? You're planning to use the teleportation formation. May I ask if you have a permit from the panel of elders? The spatial tempering cultivator asked in a hesitant manner. HMPH, I'm an elder of the city, and I demand to use the teleportation formation, Master Azure Dragon repeated in a cold voice. Forgive me, Elder Azure Dragon, but the panel of elders passed down a strict order 2 days ago, stating that all cultivators who wish to use the teleportation formations had to receive permission from the panel of elders first. If I were to go against this order, then all of us would be punished severely. Please don't make our job more difficult than it has to be, the spatial tempering cultivator said with furrowed brows. Master Azure Dragon's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and after a moment of contemplation he said, I see. In that case, I'll go and request a permit from the panel of elders. Thank you for your consideration, Elder Azure Dragon. We are truly great. Ah, Senior Azure Dragon, what are you doing? The spatial tempering cultivator had just heaved a sigh of relief when the air suddenly tightened around him, and he was completely immobilized. All of the other guards had also been bound by the same burst of invisible restrictive power, and expressions of shock and horror appeared on all of their faces. No need to be alarmed. I have something that I need to do, and I can't afford to be delayed here, Master Azure Dragon said with a cold expression. He then raised a hand, and a white jade badge suddenly appeared in his grasp. He waved the badge toward the restrictions behind the gate of the hall, and a pillar of white light shot forth to nullify the restrictions. A hint of elation appeared in Master Azure Dragon's eyes upon seeing this, and he immediately led his disciples onto one of the smaller teleportation formations in the hall. A buzzing sound rang out as the formation was activated, and Master Azure Dragon's trio vanished amid a flash of white light. Only then did the guards regain their mobility, and the spatial tempering cultivator immediately yelled in a panicked manner, "Inform the panel of elders of what happened here and repair the restrictions right away." Some of the guards hurriedly pulled out communication formation plates, while the rest summoned a series of formation treasures to repair the damaged restriction. Thus, the entire teleportation hall was plunged into a state of complete chaos. Right at this moment, a faint buzzing sound rang out from the teleportation formation that Master Azure Dragon had just used, and it was activated once again. Immediately thereafter, an extremely diminutive figure was also teleported away amid a flash of white light, and none of the guards were able to identify what it was. "Did someone else teleport away just now?" one of the guards asked in an uncertain manner, wondering if his eyes had played tricks on him. Meanwhile, Master Azure Dragon and his two disciples were flying through a bluestone passageway erected in the belly of a mountain. After just a few flashes, they emerged out of a cave that had been concealed by a restriction, then flew toward a certain direction. Not long after they had left, another streak of golden light flew out of the same cave and set off in hot pursuit. Half a day later, Master Azure Dragon's trio was flying over a barren plain countless kilometers away from Deep Heaven City. Among the trio, Master Azure Dragon was flying at the forefront, and his expression suggested that he was contemplating something important. Up ahead in the distance, a boundless desert could be seen. Right at this moment, two resounding booms rang out just over 100 feet behind Master Azure Dragon's trio, and two faint golden projections shot forth out of thin air. Sharp claws projections swept through the air, hurtling directly toward Master Azure Dragon's trio. The claw projections left golden cracks in the space in their wake, and they wove into a giant net that was impossible to evade. Master Azure Dragon was greatly alarmed by this, and a horrified look appeared on his face. "Han Li, you bastard!" he roared in an extremely resentful voice, then flipped his hands over to summon a pair of giant brushes, one golden and one silver. He swept the brushes through the air, and countless golden and silver runes surged forth in a frenzy, transforming into a light barrier that shielded him on all sides. Immediately thereafter, azure scales appeared over his face and limbs, and he rushed directly toward the net of claw projections with devastating force. In the instant before his body came into contact with the claw projections, he opened his mouth to expel a ball of azure light, which crashed toward the net ahead of him. The net of claw projections had seemed to be extremely formidable, but it was torn apart by the ball of azure light with ease. Master Azure Dragon faltered slightly upon seeing this before rushing out of the net in an elated manner, then appeared over 1,000 away. Just as he was heaving an internal sigh of relief, two howls of anguish suddenly rang out behind him. "Crap!" Master Azure Dragon hurriedly turned around to find that his two disciples had already been dismembered, and their bodies were plummeting down from above in bloody chunks. Their protective treasures had been instantly destroyed by the claw projections, and even their nascent souls hadn't managed to escape. Master Azure Dragon cast his gaze toward the two golden projections, and he immediately realized that something was amiss. "You're not Han Li, who dares to attack me?" There's no need for my master to dirty his hands with the likes of you." The voice of a little girl rang out, following which the two projections combined as one to form a ball of golden light. Within the golden light was a horned leopard-like beast that was around 10 feet in size. It was none other than the leopard Kirin beast. Master Azure Dragon swept his spiritual sense toward the golden beast, and he immediately drew a sharp breath. "You're a body integration stage spirit beast. Are you Han Li's spirit beast? Seeing as you've already figured it out, you can pass on without any regrets now. I was sent by my master to erase you from the face of this realm," the leopard Kirin beast said as a vicious light flashed through its eyes. "HMPH, he thinks a mere early body integration stage spirit beast can take my life. What a joke!" Master Azure Dragon roared with a furious expression. "You've been wounded by my master and can't muster up anywhere near your full power, yet you still dare to act so cocky. Let me see if you keep this up when I tear your nascent soul out of your body, the leopard Kirin beast snarled. Immediately thereafter, its body blurred, and specks of golden light appeared all around it before manifesting over 100 identical golden beastly projections. Huh, I just so happened to be missing a fur coat. I guess you'll suffice. Master Azure Dragon swept his sleeve through the air with an enraged look on his face, releasing 4 of 5 treasures that began to revolve around him. At the same time, he thrust his twin brushes forward, and even more runes emerged before him. The leopard Kirin beast let loose a low roar, and all of the beastly projections hurtled directly toward him as streaks of golden light. Master Azure Dragon immediately sent his treasures flying toward these beastly projections, yet just as he began to draw upon the magic power within his own body, a layer of black chi suddenly appeared over his face. 5 days later, Han Li was meditating in his secret chamber when his expression suddenly changed slightly, and he slowly opened his eyes. Moments later, spiritual light flashed from the door of the secret chamber, and a burst of golden light flew into the chamber through the door, then revealed itself to be a small golden beast that was only around a foot in size. "You're finally back. You've been away for quite some time. Did you encounter some difficulties?" Han Li asked with a faint smile. "Master, what did you do to that Azure Dragon? Almost as soon as we started battling, he seemed to have fallen prey to some kind of extremely potent poison, and I was almost as if he were going to die even if I hadn't hunted him down," the leopard Kirin beast with its eyes wide in amazement. I merely injected a wisp of the revolving evil spirit light within the spirit, engulfing heavenly flames into his body. He would have been fine had he not used too much magic power, but as soon as he tries to do so, the revolving evil spirit light would immediately take effect. With its vicious poison, even a body integration cultivator would have to meditate for a long time to refine it or temporarily repress its effects with their magic power. However, he clearly wouldn't have been able to do any of that while battling you, so his only possible fate was death, Han Li replied in a nonchalant manner. "Your powers have become truly unfathomable, Master. It's incredible that you were able to tamper with another body integration cultivator like this without their detection," the leopard Kirin beast said in an amazed voice. It's not all that remarkable. This is just a little trick that I recently developed, and it wouldn't have worked if Master Azure Dragon had spent some time to carefully examine his own body. I take it that he's no longer around, right?" Henley asked as his eyes narrowed slightly. "Rest assured, Master. I devoured that Azure Dragon's nascent soul, so he's as dead can be. However, prior to his death, he chose to unleash a powerful ability rather than continue to repress the poison, and I had to expend some energy to keep him at bay. Hence, I had no choice but to meditate for 2 days, then snuck back into the city with a group of Deep Heaven City scouts, so there's no way that anyone would have detected me," the leopard Kirin beast said with a smile. "You did very well. Now I can focus wholeheartedly on making a breakthrough to the late body integration stage," Han Li also replied with a smile. With your cultivation aptitude and all of the trump cards you've prepared, I'm sure you'll be able to make this breakthrough with ease, Master. I'll be congratulating you in advance," the leopard Kirin beast chuckled. "I certainly hope so. Now that you've completed metamorphosis, there's no need for you to continue to remain in the spirit beast bracelet. You can cultivate in the secret chamber next to mine. If you need anything, just let Qi Lingzi and the others know," Han Li said in a solemn manner. "Thank you, Master. I've been dying to get out of that spirit bracelet. I'm going to cultivate in the other secret chamber now. I'll return if you need me after you go into seclusion, Master," the leopard Kirin beast replied with an ecstatic look on its face. Han Li naturally had no objections and allowed it to depart. After the leopard Kirin beast left, Han Li took a deep breath before making a grabbing motion with one hand to summon a voice transmission talisman. He then released the talisman before closing his eyes again to continue meditating. A short while later, a female voice suddenly rang out from outside the secret chamber. "Brother Han, have you summoned me because you're about to begin your breakthrough?" The voice was extremely pleasant to the ears and belonged to none other than the Ice Phoenix. "Indeed, fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix," Han Li replied in a calm manner as he opened his eyes. Several days later, there were 7 or 8 elders of Deep Heaven City discussing something together in a secret chamber. Both Buddhist monk Jin Yue and Fairy Silver Light were among them. "So Master Azure Dragon really did perish. That's quite a pity, especially at a time like this," the white-robed elderly man sitting on the main seat sighed. If it weren't for the fact that Azure Dragon left a soul lamp in the city after he joined the panel of elders, I wouldn't have believed this to be true, either. According to the cultivator looking after the soul lamps, his one was snuffed out within half a day of his departure from the city, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said with a wry smile. HMPH, he was asking for it. He knows that there are devilish beings everywhere around the city, yet he still dared to restrict the guards and forcibly teleport away. If you ask me, he only has himself to blame, Fairy Silver Light harumphed coldly. Azure Dragon may not have been killed by devilish beings. Perhaps he died by the hands of someone else. Didn't the guards at the teleportation hall say that someone used the same teleportation formation as Azure Dragon right after he left? Perhaps that was the perpetrator, a burly black-robed man said. Are you suspecting fellow Taoist Han? Fairy Silver Light's expression darkened slightly upon hearing this. Please don't jump to conclusions, Fairy Silver Light. I never said that. All I said is that maybe Azure Dragon didn't perish by the hands of devilish beings, the man immediately denied. It was quite clear that he was quite wary of Han Li. Fairy Silver Light merely smiled and remained silent. All right, seeing as Master Azure Dragon forced his way out of the city, he has renounced his status as a member of our panel of elders. As such, there's no need for us to investigate this matter. Our top priority now should be the devilish army that has surrounded the city, the white-robed elderly man said with furrowed brows. But Master Azure Dragon is a mid-body integration cultivator. Don't we have to at least provide all of the cultivators in the city an explanation of how he died? Also, will this affect Fairy Lin Luan's attitude toward our city? The owner of the Origin Pocket Pavilion, Elder Gu, said in a contemplative manner. There's no need for that. If we don't say anything, no one will know about Master Azure Dragon's death. Even if people find out later on, it'll be after the devilish tribulation. During these perilous times, everything can wait until a later date. As for fellow Taoist Lin, she's an extremely intelligent woman. I'm sure she'll know how to handle the situation, the white-robed elderly man said in a cold voice. Everyone else exchanged a few glances upon hearing this, before nodding in agreement in the end. All right, seeing as no one has any objections, let's discuss fellow Taoist Han next. Buddhist monk Jin Yue, I heard that you sent someone to invite fellow Taoist Han to a gathering 2 days ago, but he had already gone into seclusion. Is that true? The white-robed elderly man asked. It is. I wanted to make a last-ditch effort to try and convince fellow Taoist Han to coexist with fellow Taoist Azure Dragon in the city, but his disciples told me that he had gone into seclusion and wasn't going to be seeing any guests, Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied. It seems that he predicted that you would try to seek him out, so he's intentionally avoiding you, the white-robed elderly man said in a contemplative manner. Perhaps so. A few days ago, I saw the juniors who had been bribed by Azure Dragon, and all of them were as pale as ghosts. I heard that fellow Taoist Han is extorting them for a huge sum of spirit stones and materials. I wonder if they'll be able to gather everything that fellow Taoist Han demanded of them, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said with a peculiar expression. Those little brats deserve to be taught a lesson for sticking their noses into something like this. If you ask me, fellow Taoist Han has already let them off the hook quite easily. If he weren't wary of the backers behind those juniors, I'm sure he would have punished them even more severely. The white-robed elderly man chuckled coldly. That's true. Having said that, the way that fellow Taoist Han has addressed this matter has truly been a relief to me. If he had insisted on enforcing a more severe punishment on those juniors, that could have led to quite a conflict as well, Buddhist monk Jin Yue sighed in a resigned manner. Indeed, if things really had escalated to that extent, then even I would be scratching my head, the white-robed elderly man chuckled. By the way, I heard that Azure Dragon was defeated by fellow Taoist Han in just 3 attacks. Surely that's an exaggeration, right? The black-robed man asked. No, it's true. Fellow Taoist Han's powers were truly incredible. Even the average late-body integration stage most likely won't be a match for him. Fairy Silver Light and fellow Taoist Gu were also present. I'm sure they'll back me up here, Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied with a serious expression. The black-robed man turned to Fairy Silver Light and Elder Gu upon hearing this, and Fairy Silver Light displayed no reaction, while Elder Gu gave a solemn nod in confirmation. The black-robed man was even more astonished upon seeing this, as were all of the other cultivators present who hadn't interacted with Han Li much. Surely he's not actually more powerful than a late-body integration cultivator. That Master Azure Dragon has quite a resounding reputation, but if he couldn't even withstand 3 attacks from a cultivator of the same cultivation base, then his reputation was most likely overinflated in the first place. Just because fellow Taoist Han was able to defeat him doesn't mean he's actually that freakish of a talent. The black-robed man was really grasping at straws now. I'm afraid you're mistaken, fellow Taoist. That Master Azure Dragon was a half-demon who can adopt a half-dragon form, and that, in conjunction with his Buddhist cultivation arts, presented a very formidable package. However, he had made the mistake of picking the wrong opponent. Fellow Taoist Han is a simultaneous cultivator, and is capable of taking on a giant ape form with powers that exceed even Azure Dragon's half-dragon form. He severely wounded Azure Dragon with his first 2 attacks alone, and could have even killed Azure Dragon with his 3rd attack had he intended to do so. Thinking back, if I were to face fellow Taoist Han in battle, there would be no alternative for me other than to flee with all my might, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said in a serious manner. In that case, it seems the rumors about fellow Taoist Han being hunted by sacred ancestor clones were true. With his powers, it's not all that far-fetched that he was able to escape from such formidable beings, the white-robed elderly man remarked. I don't know how he managed to escape from those sacred ancestor clones, but I did bear witness to him killing several devilish lords in quick succession. Fairy Silver Light also chimed in a solemn voice. Sacred ancestors. Many of the cultivators present were very alarmed to hear this. It seems that fellow Taoist Han truly is an exceptional talent. With his assistance, our chances of securing victory against the devilish army would be significantly increased. Buddhist monk Jin Yue, try to recruit him to our panel of elders again. Tell him he can raise any conditions, and we'll do our best to satisfy him, the white-robed elderly man said. All right, but I think the chances of that are going to be very slim, Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied in a rather pessimistic manner. I'm aware of that. Otherwise, he would have joined the panel of elders the first time we invited him. In any case, it can't hurt to try. All right, setting this matter aside for now, we received a report from our scouts stating that the devilish army is very likely going to launch an all-out assault on our city in several months to a year. The white-robed elderly man said as a grim look appeared on his face, and all of the other elders' hearts jolted upon hearing this. Shortly thereafter, the meeting between the elders concluded, and everything resumed as normal in Deep Heaven City. Just as the white-robed elderly man had said, without anyone leaking the news, none of the ordinary beings in the city were aware that a mid-body integration stage human cultivator had already passed away. Of course, this news wasn't kept a secret from Fairy Lin Luan. Upon hearing this news, she was initially quite shocked and horrified, but she quickly calmed down and never mentioned Master Azure Dragon again, as if she had never even known him. Unfortunately for the panel of elders, their attempts to recruit Han Li had proven to be futile. Han Li had been in seclusion this entire time, proclaiming that he was cultivating some type of powerful ability. Thus, Buddhist monk Jin Yue could only wait patiently until he came out of seclusion. He was sure that Han Li would emerge from seclusion before the devilish army commenced its all-out attack. Aside from Buddhist monk Jin Yue, Fairy Silver Light, and several other body integration cultivators, all of the other elders had their attention drawn to the frequent harassment attacks launched by the devilish army, so they eventually forgot about Han Li. Even the white-robed elderly man only asked about Han Li a few more times before setting the matter aside. At this point, the devilish army still hadn't deployed their main forces to attack the city, but the harassment attacks they were unleashing were becoming more and more ferocious. Letter 1D487, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4E, letter 1D66C, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D4AT. During these attacks, even spatial tempering stage casualties had become very commonplace. Thus, the elders of the city naturally had to step in, and 2 or 3 elders had to be present to face every devilish attack in order to ensure that morale remained high. At the same time, the entirety of Deep Heaven City was operating at full capacity. All types of tool refinement workshops were packed to the rafters with workers, and treasures and spirit tools were being refined with no material expenses being spared. The cultivators who were adept in the art of talismans had also been grouped together to craft low-grade talismans day and night. In a battle of such a massive scale, low-grade talismans were often more effective and efficient to produce than mid-grade and high-grade ones. After all, with the time and materials required to refine a mid-grade talismans, tens or even hundreds of low-grade talismans could be produced, and that wasn't even taking into account the vast disparity between the success rates of refining the different talismans. As for high-grade talismans, only a select group of expert talisman refinement masters could produce them. On top of that, many of the low-grade cultivators and manual laborers in the city had also been put to work. They were organized into several enormous groups of different numbers as the backup forces of the city. Aside from that, all of the city's formations and restrictions had also been thoroughly examined several times to ensure that they could be relied upon to resist the devilish army. In summary, Deep Heaven City was preparing for war. Under this tense and frenetic atmosphere, half a year flew by in the blink of an eye. On this day, the white-robed elderly man and Buddhist monk Jin Yue were discussing an important matter in a conference hall when the door was abruptly flung open from the outside, and a silver-armored guard hurriedly rushed in. "Who said you could come in here?" the white-robed elderly man asked in a vexed manner. "Senior, I came here to inform you that the spiritual chi outside is in a completely chaotic state. It seems that someone is making a major breakthrough," the guard hurriedly reported as he extended a respectful bow. "A major breakthrough? Could it be that someone's progressing to the mid-body integration stage? That's fantastic news. Why do you look to be in such a panic?" the white-robed elderly man asked as his expression eased slightly. "The issue is that the heavenly phenomena are far too ferocious for a mid-body integration stage breakthrough. The situation seems to be even more fearsome than what late-body integration stage breakthroughs are rumored to be like," the guard replied in a panicked manner. The white-robed elderly man was rather surprised to hear this. "Oh, let's go and take a look, fellow Taoist Jin Yue." "Sure, I'm also very interested to see just which fellow Taoist is making their breakthrough," Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied with a nod. Thus, they were led out of the hall by the guard, and as soon as they emerged outside, the white-robed elderly man's expression immediately changed slightly. With his mid-body integration stage spiritual sense, he was instantly able to sense that the spiritual chi in the air had become extremely active, as if they were being affected by some type of fearsome power. He unconsciously sped up, and in the blink of an eye, he and Buddhist monk Jin Yue had arrived on a massive terrace. There were around a dozen guards gathered on the terrace, all of whom were looking into the distance with flabbergasted expressions. The white-robed elderly man's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he cleared his throat to make his presence known. Only then did the guards notice him and Buddhist monk Jin Yue, and they immediately extended respectful bows. Just as the white-robed elderly man was about to scold these subordinates of his, Buddhist monk Jin Yue suddenly let loose a faint cry of surprise. The white-robed elderly man immediately cast his gaze toward the same direction as Buddhist monk Jin Yue, upon which an astonished look appeared on his face. There in the distance, the sky had turned bright red, and crimson fiery clouds were revolving in midair like a giant fireball. Beneath the fiery clouds, countless wisps of colorful light were rapidly converging to form a series of rainbow bridges. Close to half of the entire city was encompassed beneath the fireball and crimson clouds, but compared to this stunning visual stimulus, the spiritual pressure radiating from the heavenly phenomena was even more astonishing. Due to how far away they were, they could only sense a tiny portion of this spiritual pressure, but they were still struck by a sense of asphyxiation. Furthermore, this pressure was only continuing to mount, and it seemed that something terrifying was brewing in the distance. These heavenly phenomena really are far more fearsome than what a mid-body integration stage breakthrough could bring about. Let's go and take a closer look, fellow Taoist Jin. It would be extremely fortunate for the city if someone could make a late-body integration stage breakthrough. We have to keep a lookout for them and ensure that they aren't disrupted, the white-robed elderly man said. Of course, witnessing a late-body integration stage tribulation transcendence would be a brilliant opportunity for us. If we can see it up close, I'm sure it'll benefit our future cultivation immensely, Buddhist monk Jin Yue immediately agreed. Thus, the white-robed elderly man swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of white that swept up his own body, then flew away into the distance. Buddhist monk Jin Yue also followed along as a ball of golden light, and only then did the guards heave a collective sigh of relief before erupting into spirited discussion surrounding the heavenly phenomena that were taking place. At this point, all of the high-grade cultivators in the entire city had been alerted by these phenomena, and countless streaks of light were converging from all directions. The low-grade and mid-grade cultivators were also very intrigued, but they knew that this was not something that they could participate in, so they could only look on from where they were, but that certainly didn't stop them from discussing the situation with those around them. The theories they came up with came in all shapes and forms. There were some stating that a certain spirit treasure was emerging, while others were proclaiming that an almighty spirit beast was creating these phenomena. Of course, most believed that this was stemming from a certain cultivator's tribulation transcendence, and some of the more knowledgeable and experienced individuals had guessed that this had to be a body integration stage tribulation transcendence. Of course, none of them could have imagined that the body integration cultivators were just as astonished as they were once they gathered close to the heavenly phenomena. The white-robed elderly man and Buddhist monk Jin Yue weren't the first ones to arrive on the scene. Over 20 spatial tempering and body integration cultivators had arrived before them, and they were appraising the phenomena from close to 100 kilometers away. Fairy Silver Light was among them as well, and she gave the white-robed elderly man and Buddhist monk Jin Yue a nod from afar before casting her gaze toward the unfolding phenomena again. The white-robed elderly man and Buddhist monk Jin Yue exchanged a glance before all stopping nearby. If I'm not mistaken, fellow Taoist Han is the only body integration cultivator who lives in this area, right? The white-robed elderly man suddenly asked. Indeed, and fellow Taoist Han's abode seems to be situated right at the center of this heavenly phenomena, Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied. That means it must be fellow Taoist Han who's making a breakthrough. It's no wonder that he went into seclusion, the white-robed elderly man said. That does appear to be the case. This heavenly phenomena appears to have been triggered by a late body integration stage breakthrough, but it's far more fearsome than one that I was fortunate enough to have witnessed in the past, Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied in a hesitant manner. There's nothing strange about that. The heavenly phenomena triggered by one's breakthrough depends on their powers. Generally speaking, the more fearsome the phenomena, the more powerful the tribulation transcender is, but at the same time, they'll also be plunged into an extremely perilous situation. With the ferocity of this set of heavenly phenomena, I think fellow Taoist Han may not be able to successfully transcend his tribulation, the white-robed elderly man mused in a contemplative manner. There are many mid-body integration stage fellow Taoists in our human and demon races just like us, but only very few who have made it to the late body integration stage. If I recall correctly, fellow Taoist Han seems to have only reached the mid-body integration stage not long ago. This rate of progression is far too extraordinary. Even the most legendary figures in the history of our two races most likely can't compare with him, Buddhist monk Jin Yue agreed with a nod. It's exactly because of fellow Taoist Han's stunning aptitude that this step will be even more difficult for him to take. After such a short time, his foundation can't be all that solid. That'll increase the difficulty of making this breakthrough, the white-robed elderly man said. We're all just speculating here. It's yet to be seen what's actually going to happen. Perhaps fellow Taoist Han will give the two of us a huge surprise, Buddhist monk Jin Yue chuckled. I certainly hope so. If another late body integration cultivator can support our city, then we'll have a much easier time against the devilish army. Fellow Taoist Han's powers as a mid-body integration cultivator were already comparable to those of a late body integration cultivator. If he were to succeed in this breakthrough, he would most likely even be able to face a sacred ancestor clone in battle, the white-robed elderly man mused. Indeed, prior to the descent of the true bodies of the sacred ancestors into this realm, their clones will be the most powerful beings in the devilish army. If there's a way for fellow Taoist Han to hold them off, then we can abandon our original plan and focus our efforts on dealing with those devilish lords, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said as a cold light flashed through his eyes. The white-robed elderly man nodded in response, before turning toward the phenomena taking place in the distance again. At this point, the fiery clouds up above had already transformed into a crimson sea that had encompassed virtually the entire sky, and beneath the fiery clouds, a series of giant runes of different colors were taking shape. These runes were radiating dazzling light, and in the next instant, they abruptly surged up toward the fiery clouds, as if they were about to pierce through the clouds. A loud buzzing sound rang out from the fiery clouds, and they began to churn even more violently. As soon as the giant runes came into contact with the clouds, a peculiar sizzling sound rang out, following which the runes began to crumble away. They had been completely repressed under the clouds. A cold harumph suddenly reverberated through the entire space, following which a blurry humanoid figure that was over 10,000 feet tall appeared amid a flash of azure light, then pointed upward several times in quick succession in an expressionless manner. Invisible ripples ran through the space up above, and the rate at which the giant runes were being manifested sped up by over tenfold. Millions of runes emerged in the span of just a few breaths, then surged upward like a reverse waterfall. However, the fiery clouds remained as resolute as ever, even against the drastic increase in the influx of giant runes. Both the fiery clouds and giant runes were expanding at an alarming rate, and it was as if they were never going to stop. However, the giant humanoid projection seemed to have grown impatient, and it abruptly swept an arm toward the fiery clouds from afar. Even though it was only a projection, the attack that it unleashed triggered a resounding boom akin to a dull thunderclap. The azure humanoid projection crumbled away in a flash, but an enormous burst of invisible power surged easily into the clouds before immediately exploding. A string of explosions rang out in rapid succession, and a giant hole with a diameter of over 1,000 feet appeared within the clouds. Some of the giant runes down below instantly surged through the hole in the clouds, following which the hole was sealed in a flash. Those runes converged to form another enormous rune that was around an acre in size, and it was gradually being converted into a substantial form. However, right at this crucial juncture, dark clouds suddenly began to appear above the fiery clouds. These dark clouds then transformed into a series of giant black worms amid a string of explosive thunderclaps. Extremely thick bottles of silver lightning began to appear over the bodies of these worms, creating an astonishing sight to behold. There are 81 of them. That's incredible. I recall the late body integration stage tribulation that I witnessed in the past only had 36 worms. Buddhist monk Jin Yue exclaimed. A hint of astonishment also flashed through the white-robed elderly man's upon seeing this, but he said in a calm manner, "I wonder how fellow Taoist Han is going to deal with such a fearsome late-body integration stage tribulation. If any mishaps occur, he could easily end up with severe wounds and fail to make his breakthrough. It's a pity that we can't assist him during this process. Otherwise, perhaps there would still be hope for him." He seemed to have already convinced himself that Han Li definitely wouldn't be able to transcend this tribulation. "There's no need to be overly concerned, Brother Gu. Fellow Taoist Han must have his reasons for attempting a breakthrough at a time like this. Let's wait and see for now," Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied in a serious manner. Right at this moment, another rumbling thunderclap erupted, and several tens of bolts of golden lightning crashed down from above, each of which was as thick as a water tank. The lightning pierced directly through the massive rune and fiery clouds, then struck the giant black worms with devastating force. A resounding boom rang out, and massive holes were blown into the bodies of the black worms by the bolts of golden lightning, while the silver lightning around their bodies were all devoured by the golden lightning. If it weren't for the fact that the golden lightning had disappeared after only a brief moment, the black worms really could have been completely destroyed. However, the golden lightning seemed to have enraged these worms, and they let loose ferocious roars as cloud and mist surged toward the holes in their bodies, regenerating them in a flash. The worms then opened their mouths to expel gusts of fierce black wings which swept downward in a frenzy, and the fiery clouds down below began to burn with even greater ferocity. The wind and flames complemented one another, forming a massive sea of flames that encompassed an area of close to 100 kilometers. The sea of flames then began to descend, and the space down below was illuminated into a bright red color, as if the entire space were being set alight. Buddhist monk Jin Yue and the white-robed elderly man's expressions both changed slightly upon seeing this. If the tribulation transcender were to fail to control this sea of flames, countless normal cultivators down below would perish. The other cultivators nearby also drew a sharp breath in unison. They didn't think that the heavenly tribulation would be this formidable even in its initial stages. If they were in Han Li's place, all of them would have most likely been reduced to ashes already. At the center of the sea of flame was none other than the stone pagoda that Han Li was staying in. This pagoda was naturally protected by some restrictions, but if it were to be struck by the sea of flames, it would most definitely be destroyed. Right at this moment, a ball of silver light appeared at the top of the pagoda, following which a clear cry rang out as giant silver fire raven emerged. When it first appeared, the fire raven was only around 10 feet in size, but as it spread its wings, it swelled to over 100 times its original before hurtling directly toward the sea of flames. Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D42B, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D6AT. Letter 1D5F0, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D5FA. A dull thump rang out as the silver fire raven vanished into the sea of flames, but in the next instant, the sea of fire suddenly began to churn violently. The crimson flames converged rapidly toward the giant fire raven, as if they were being drawn by an irresistible force, then quickly vanished amid flashes of light. In just a short time, over a fifth of the entire sea of flames had disappeared, and at this rate, it wouldn't be long before the whole sea of fire ceased to exist. However, before that could happen, the giant black worms up above suddenly opened their mouths to expel bursts of white chi that swept downward. White chi appeared to be quite ordinary, but as it dispersed through the air, over 10 translucent and peerlessly sharp ice spikes that were each around 10 feet in length were created. Before the ice spikes had even begun to descend, a burst of ghastly howling rang out from within the stone pagoda down below, following which 5 wagon wheel-sized skulls flew out, then opened their mouths to expel 5 streams of glacial flames that swept directly upward. As soon as the ice spikes came into contact with these glacial flames, they reverted back to white spiritual chi before vanishing amid the flames. Even after these 2 types of attacks had been nullified, the black worms remained completely unfazed. Their bodies twisted around, and they exploded amid resounding booms. The fragments of their bodies then transformed into countless giant rocks of different sizes. The smallest of these rocks were smaller than human heads, but the largest ones were over 10,000 feet in size and resembled small mountains. With so many giant rocks crashing down from above, it was as if doomsday had arrived, and all of the normal cultivators down below instantly paled in horror. Within a secret chamber on the deepest level of the stone pagoda, there was a person seated with his eyes tightly shut on a yellow futon. Spiritual chi was surging all over his body, and his face was quite red. Sweat was pouring down from his forehead, and it seemed that he was straining against something in a very arduous manner. Before him stood a pair of miniature mountains, one black and one azure, each of which was around 10 feet tall. Above him, there were 72 small azure swords that were revolving in the air. There were also layers of black runes surging over his body, encompassing a suit of inky black armor. Strangely enough, there were countless gray specks of light dispersed throughout the entire secret chamber. Each speck of light was only around the size of a human thumb, but they were giving off an extremely frosty aura. The person seated on the ground was none other than Han Li. Judging from his current expression, he didn't seem to be in a very good condition. The gray specks of light were constantly drifting around him, occasionally taking on the forms of malicious monsters, as well humanoid projections of both genders and all ages. However, regardless of what form the gray specks of light took, all of them immediately pounced viciously toward Han Li, only to be forced into retreat by the treasures hovering around him. As such, these malicious apparitions could only continue to buzz around the area encompassed by the treasures. However, as they were forced back over and over again, these beings were gradually becoming more and more violent and impatient. Han Li paid no heed to these beings at all, but the situation seemed to be becoming more and more strenuous for him. In reality, that was indeed the case. Within a certain mysterious space within his mind, an azure-robed spiritual sense clone of his was currently locked in battle with someone else. The opponent wore an inky black robe and was controlling 72 black flying swords. The black-robed figure's appearance was completely identical to Han Li, but there was crimson light shimmering within his eyes, and he had a sinister smile on his face. His entire body was also enshrouded in devilish chi, making him resemble an almighty fiend celestial. Han Li made hand seals with both hands, controlling his 72 azure flying swords with one hand, while releasing bolts of golden lightning with the other. However, the black-robed Han Li was able to easily counter the azure flying swords with his black flying swords, and he also released bolts of black lightning that were even thicker than the oncoming bolts of golden lightning in retaliation. Han Li's expression darkened upon seeing this, and over 100 arcs of golden lightning erupted from his body at once to eradicate the oncoming bolts of black lightning. All of a sudden, an extremely sweet and pleasant female voice rang out. "He, resistance is futile, brat. This inner demon is a complete replica of yourself. No, in fact, with the enhancements it's receiving from me, it's even more powerful than you. I'm sure you've also realized this after battling it for so long. HMPH, this inner demon is indeed slightly more powerful than I am, but you're delusional if you think it can defeat me. You only managed to sneak into my soul during a lapse of concentration. Otherwise, this inner demon wouldn't even exist," Han Li said with a dark expression as he flipped his hand over to reveal a short silver ruler, which he swept through the air to release countless ruler projections toward the inner demon. You are indeed far more powerful than I imagined, and it would be unrealistic to expect a mere inner demon to destroy your soul, but don't forget that you're transcending your late body integration stage tribulation. I don't know how you're protecting yourself, but with most of your spiritual sense and magic power dedicated to this battle, there's no way you'll be able to successfully transcend the tribulation. If you don't want to die, then you'd better hand over that suit of devilish armor. Once you do that, I'll leave right away so you can transcend your tribulation in peace, the woman said in the voice of a temptress. The owner of the voice was none other than the heavenly devilish monarch, whose devilish intent Han Li had once encountered in Cloud City. It had somehow managed to sneak into Han Li's spiritual sense during this critical juncture in his tribulation transcendence, then created this inner demon to try and devour his soul. If it weren't for the fact that Han Li's spiritual sense was far more condensed than the average cultivator, there was a good chance that the inner demon would have succeeded. You think I would believe the words of a heavenly devilish monarch? I'm guessing that as soon as the thought of making a concession crosses my mind, the inner demon would immediately pounce on me and devour my soul. I had always heard that heavenly devilish monarchs were most adept in coercion and could often kill their targets without even needing to battle them. It seems that this is true, Han Li replied in a completely expressionless manner. He, you sure are alert. In that case, I'll wait for you to fall to your own demise. After your body and soul gets destroyed during the heavenly tribulation, I'll still be able to recover the suit of devilish armor. The heavenly devilish monarch's voice suddenly turned into an extremely rough and husky male voice. The inner demon swept a sleeve through the air, and also released countless black ruler projections to nullify all of Han Li's attacks. Han Li's expression darkened even further upon seeing this, and right at this moment, the other minority portion of his spiritual sense transmitted a message to him, stating that the heavenly tribulation was about to reach a critical stage, and that the magic power and spiritual sense he had left behind most likely wouldn't be able to withstand it. As such, he had to kill the inner demon right away, so he could focus wholeheartedly on his tribulation transcendence. With that in mind, Han Li immediately let loose a low roar, and he made a hand seal as golden light flashed from his body, following which he transformed into a mountainous golden ape. You may be able to replicate my cultivation arts and treasures, but let's see if you can replicate my transformation technique as well. Han Li roared as he swung his fists toward the inner demon. Two incredible powerful bursts of golden shockwaves surged forth, threatening to pulverize the inner demon into mincemeat. A peculiar look flashed through the inner demon's eyes, and black light flashed from its arms as a layer of black scales appeared over its skin, following which it abruptly made a grabbing motion upward. Countless black claw projections appeared above the inner demon, forming a giant net that managed to keep the golden shockwaves at bay. However, once the two giant golden fists arrived, the net was completely shattered. During this split-second delay, the inner demon had withdrawn its 72 black flying swords back into its body, then let loose a guttural snarl as black chi surged out of its body in a frenzy. A pair of thick black horns appeared on its head, and at the same time, its body swelled drastically in size. In the blink of an eye, it had transformed into a giant black-scaled devilish minotaur that was just as massive as the golden ape, and it reached directly toward the ape's fists with its bare hands. Two resounding booms rang out, and the giant golden ape was forced back several steps, while the inner demon was forced to plummet down from above, smashing a massive crater into the ground. Following that single exchange, Han Li immediately realized that the minotaur wasn't as powerful as his giant mountain ape form, but there wasn't a large disparity between them. At this rate, even if he could secure victory, it would definitely take a very long time. Under these circumstances, he naturally couldn't afford to delay any further. A hint of urgency appeared in Han Li's eyes, and he finally gritted his teeth before making a decision. The ability that he was going to unleash next was going to expend a lot of spiritual power, which would be extremely detrimental to his tribulation transcendence, but he had no choice. Once he steadied himself, he immediately let loose a long cry, upon which a golden projection with 3 heads and 6 arms appeared behind him. The projection opened its 6 eyes, before instantly flying toward the giant ape as a faint shadow. A layer of golden light swirled over Han Li's body, following which 2 more furry heads appeared on his shoulders, alongside 4 additional arms. The giant golden ape had also taken on an appearance with 3 heads and 6 arms, and its body then swelled even further to several times its original size. At the same time, Han Li took a deep breath, and a ball of golden light abruptly appeared over each of his 6 palms. In the next instant, the 6 balls of golden light began to rapidly expand, and in what seemed like nothing more than the blink of an eye, they combined as one to form a gigantic ball of light that was over 1,000 feet in size. Han Li's 3 heads then began to chant in unison, and countless runes emerged from within the golden ball of light before rapidly revolving around it. An enormous golden vortex instantly took shape in midair, before being hoisted higher upward by Han Li's 6 giant hands. A burst of tremendous suction force erupted out of the center of the vortex, and the devilish minotaur stumbled as it was forcibly dragged toward the vortex. It immediately let loose an enraged roar, and a horrified look appeared on its face for the first time. It was a replica of Han Li's body, but due to its inability to replicate true spirit blood, the 12 awakening transformations was the only ability it was unable to mimic. Thus, it was naturally rendered completely powerless in the face of the attack, unleashed by the combined powers of Han Li's giant mountain ape form and Provenant's true devil arts. In its desperation, the devilish minotaur released all types of treasures, including its 72 black flying swords, 2 extreme mountains, and short black ruler to attack the giant vortex, all to no avail. As soon as the treasures reached within the general vicinity of the vortex, it would be swept up by the countless golden runes surging out of the vortex, then forcibly drawn into it before disappearing without a trace. At this point, the devilish minotaur had also been drawn to no more than 300 to 400 feet away from the vortex. All of a sudden, it summoned a crimson trident amid a flash of black light, then plunged it down into the ground, using it as an anchor to just barely arrest its own momentum. An elated look immediately appeared on the devilish minotaur's face. However, right at this moment, Han Li let loose a low cry and hurled the golden vortex downward like a giant mountain. The inner demon only had a chance to let loose a howl of anguish before it was completely inundated by golden light. HMPH, you were lucky this time, but if I can manifest an inner demon once, then I can do it a second time. There's definitely no way you'll be able to survive, the heavenly devilish monarch roared in a furious voice. Immediately thereafter, a ball of black chi emerged out of thin air, then quickly began to take on a humanoid form. There won't be a second time. You're delusional if you think you can go into hiding again after you've already revealed yourself to me. Han Li harumphed coldly in response, then suddenly opened one of his 3 mouths to expel a ball of azure light. The azure light was formed by the spiritual chi within his body, and it contained a stick of yellow half-burned incense that was giving off the faint aroma of sandalwood. Blue light flashed from the eyes of Han Li's central head, and he made a grabbing motion to draw the stick of incense into his grasp before rubbing his hands together vigorously. A ball of silver flames emerged between his palms, and a plume of faint yellow smoke instantly began to disperse through the air. At the same time, one of his other heads exhaled with all its might, and the yellow smoke transformed into an arrow that shot forth through the air, then abruptly vanished mid-flight. In the next instant, the arrow reappeared amid a flash of yellow light not far away from Han Li before plunging into what appeared to be nothing more than empty space. A muffled groan rang out, and a ball of twisted black light suddenly appeared out of thin air. The yellow arrow was embedded right into the center of the ball of light. There was a miniature humanoid figure that was around several inches tall situated within the black light, and even though its body had been impaled by the arrow, it chuckled in a derisive manner. HMPH, you think an ordinary treasure like this can harm me? You must be getting desperate. The miniature humanoid figure's facial features were completely indistinguishable, but just the mere sight of the pure devilish chi emanating from its body made the onlooker feel as if they had been plunged into a glacial pit. A relieved look appeared on Han Li's face upon confirming that the arrow had struck its target, and he said in a cold voice, "When did I say this is an ordinary treasure? Seeing as you're just a wisp of a heavenly devilish monarch's devilish intent, this thing will be more than enough to get rid of you." What this is? The miniature humanoid figure shuddered as it suddenly recalled what this item was from its extensive wealth of memories. However, it was already too late. In the next instant, the yellow arrow exploded, and yellow smoke that carried the faint fragrance of sandalwood instantly dispersed to encompass roughly the surrounding acre of space. The miniature black figure was unable to maintain its form within the faint yellow smoke, and before it completely vanished, it yelled in an indignant manner, "Impossible! Black infernal ice incense has already gone extinct in this realm. How could you possibly have this?" Don't celebrate too early. When you make your grand ascension stage breakthrough, I'll be sure to descend into this realm in person and make sure to put an end to your life." Thus, the heavenly devilish monarch's devilish intent was forcibly ejected out of Han Li's spiritual sense. He quickly made a hand seal upon seeing this, and reverted back to his human form in the blink of an eye. His face had turned slightly pale, and he was panting slightly from exertion. The ability that he had just unleashed had clearly expended a considerable amount of spiritual sense and magic power, which was why he had refrained from using it earlier. Han Li glanced at the spot where the devilish figure had just disappeared, and his expression remained quite grim. He immediately made another hand seal, and his body disintegrated into specks of azure light. In order to prevent the inner demon from affecting the spiritual sense he had left outside his soul, he had completely cut off his connection to his own physical body. Now that this threat had been averted, he was naturally immediately returning to his own body. In the instant that Han Li opened his eyes, he caught sight of the surrounding gray specks of light, which had transformed into 5 ghastly apparitions that were trying to attack him through his treasures with all their might. With each assault that they unleashed, the surrounding treasures would tremor violently, and the spiritual light being released by them had also dimmed significantly. The 5 apparitions were constantly revolving around Han Li, with astonishingly violent auras emanating from their bodies, and Han Li's expression immediately darkened upon seeing this. He let loose a loud cry as countless arcs of golden lightning sprang forth out of his body, and the 5 devilish apparitions manifested from baleful qi were instantly destroyed, without being able to offer any resistance. After taking care of these 5 devilish apparitions, Han Li's expression only darkened even further. At this point, the restrictions and formations he had prepared specifically for this heavenly tribulation had already been activated, conjuring up several massive layers of light barriers that encompassed the entire stone pagoda. There were currently 81 giant black worms overhead, blasting forth devastating bolts of lightning of different colors. The smallest bolts of lightning were only around a foot in length, while the longest were around 500 meters long, and they were crashing down in a torrential downpour. Amid the flashes of lightning, the restrictions were beginning to display signs of overexertion. At this moment, all of the bolts of lightning crashing down from above suddenly combined as one to form a gigantic pillar of lightning, and all of the light barriers were instantly shattered. Without any further impediment standing in its way, the bolts of lightning instantly vanished, then reappeared above Han Li in his secret chamber before continuing to crash down with devastating might. Han Li immediately swept a sleeve through the air to release a dozen or so bolts of golden lightning, and a deafening boom rang out as the golden lightning and 5-colored lightning canceled out one another. However, this was only the beginning. Even more bolts of 5-colored lightning had appeared overhead, and they were raining down upon Han Li with incredible ferocity. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he made a grabbing motion with one hand. A ball of azure light appeared over his palm in a flash, then shot forth in all directions as 72 streaks of azure light. All of a sudden, a loud dragon's roar rang out, and countless streaks of azure sword qi appeared before dispersing all throughout the entire secret chamber, then converged to form an azure ball of light above Han Li. Letter 1D667, letter 1D65A, letter 1D65A, letter 1D500, letter 1D486, letter 1D4EB. Letter 1D484, letter 1D664, letter 1D4F6. The ball rotated on the spot to release countless streaks of dazzling sword qi, then shattered to reveal a green coiled dragon. In the blink of an eye, Han Li had set up his azure coil sword formation. As expected of one of his trump cards, the azure coiled dragon managed to remain completely unscathed in the face of the 5-colored lightning, and it was able to vanquish all of the bolts of lightning with devastating sweeps of its powerful tail. At this point, the fiery clouds up above had already recovered to their original mass, and fire attribute spiritual qi surged within them, following which head-sized crimson fireballs came crashing down from above. Han Li naturally wasn't going to be fearful of these oncoming balls of flames. He took a deep breath and summoned his 2 extreme mountains, then laid a hand on each of them, upon which gray divine essence-effused light and streaks of invisible sword qi surged out of the 2 mountains in a frenzy. A day and a night later, the 81 black worms in the sky finally self-detonated into clouds of black qi, and at this point, all of the spectating high-grade cultivators had already been completely awestruck by the ferocity of this heavenly tribulation, as well as the measures that Han Li had taken to oppose it. This was the first time they had ever seen such a fearsome heavenly tribulation, and it was downright incredible to them that the might of a single person had been able to stand up against it. In the instant that the black worms disappeared, a long cry rang out from within the stone pagoda, piercing straight into the heavens. At the same time, an azure pillar of light erupted out of the pagoda, reducing all of the remnant fiery clouds in black chi to countless runes of different colors. After the pillar of light faded, an enormous humanoid projection that was around 10,000 feet tall, with an appearance that was completely identical to Han Li, emerged high up in the air. "Isn't that fellow Taoist Han?" "I see, so it's Senior Han who's been transcending his late-body integration stage tribulation." Most of the nearby cultivators were immediately able to identify the projection as Han Li, and they immediately burst into spirited discussion. The azure projection looked around at the countless runes in the nearby area, and a faint smile appeared on its face before it abruptly inhaled violently. All of the runes shuddered before transforming into specks of light that flooded into the giant projection's mouth, and with each inhalation, tens of thousands of these specks of light were devoured. At the same time, the azure projection was expanding at a rapid rate, and after all of the surrounding specks of light had been devoured, more specks of light began to converge from the distance like moths to a flame, only to be devoured by the azure projection as well. An alarmed look appeared on the white-robed elderly man's face upon seeing this, and he hurriedly yelled, "Everyone, get back. Fellow Taoist Han has already transcended his late-body integration stage tribulation and is currently devouring the world's origin chi to reform his soul. We're all currently in the affected area, so we have to get back right away." All of the high-grade cultivators present immediately flew away in different directions upon hearing this, with a few exceptions. But those outliers were also forced to retreat in the face of the cold glare, aimed toward them by the white-haired elderly man. "HMPH, I can't believe those bastards were planning to take the world's origin chi gathered by fellow Taoist Han at such a crucial juncture," the white-robed elderly man harumphed coldly. "It's no wonder that some people would try to take such a risk. The world's origin chi that fellow Taoist Han has gathered is of the highest level of purity. If they can even take a tiny portion of it, they would benefit immensely," Buddhist monk Jin Yue chuckled. "But if we were to allow that, it could affect the reformation of fellow Taoist Han's soul. The effect would be virtually negligible, but we certainly wouldn't want fellow Taoist Han to become dissatisfied with our city over something like this," the white-robed elderly man said as a complex look appeared on his face. "Indeed. Besides, if something were to go wrong during the reformation of fellow Taoist Han's soul, he definitely wouldn't let those opportunistic individuals off the hook. In any case, fellow Taoist Han's successful breakthrough to the late-body integration stage is fantastic news for our city. Even now, I still feel like I'm in a dream." I had quite a great deal of confidence in fellow Taoist Han, but even I didn't think that he would be able to transcend such a fearsome tribulation so smoothly, Buddhist monk Jin Yue sighed. "It's only taken fellow Taoist Han several centuries to progress from the early body integration stage to the late body integration stage. Compared to him, I feel like I've wasted my entire life. Perhaps there really is a chance that he'll become a second grand ascension cultivator of our human race," the white-robed elderly man mused as he stroked his long beard. "Indeed, with fellow Taoist Han's stunning aptitude, it's certainly not impossible. However, while progressing to the late body integration stage is already extremely arduous, it still pales in comparison to a grand ascension stage breakthrough. Even for fellow Taoist Han, there's only a very slim opportunity," Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied with a nod. "Of course, but he still has a sliver of an opportunity to attain immortality in the future. In contrast, that ship has already sailed for us, and we can only await the conclusion of our lifespans," the white-robed elderly man said in a slightly dejected manner. "There's no need to dwell so much on this matter, fellow Taoist Gu. Very few people in the entire history of our human race have managed to reach the grand ascension stage. We're already immensely fortunate to have Senior Mo in our generation," Buddhist monk Jin Yue replied. "He, you sure are enlightened, fellow Taoist Jin. Indeed, you're right. Even for grand ascension cultivators, there's one final major obstacle to be overcome before immortality can be attained. I've heard occasional tales of mighty figures in foreign races successfully ascending to immortality, but no one in the recorded history of our two races has succeeded, so it's certainly far from a simple task," the white-robed elderly man chuckled. "There have been several seniors who have attempted to transcend ascension tribulations in the past, but all of them did so in secret, so no one witnessed their tribulation transcendences. Perhaps some of them managed to succeed in the end, Buddhist monk Jin Yue said in a hopeful manner. Perhaps. In any case, that has nothing to do with the current state of our city. Seeing as fellow Taoist Han has already succeeded in his tribulation transcendence, let's not delay here any longer. Otherwise, it would be quite troublesome if fellow Taoist Han were to misconstrue our presence as a sign that we're harboring malicious intent, the white-robed elderly man replied. Buddhist monk Jin Yue naturally had no objections to this, and the two of them instantly flew away from the scene. In the distance, the giant projection was still gathering the world's origin chi in a frenzy, and at this point, over half of the entire Deep Heaven city had become a funnel for the world's origin chi. In the end, the projection swelled to around 50,000 feet tall, and it was visible to everyone in the city, thereby naturally creating a massive stir. Not only were the humans and demons in the city able to see the projection formed by Han Li's soul, the devilish beings in the devilish strongholds and pyramids further away were also able to see a blurry silhouette in the distance, as well as sense the surging world's origin chi within Deep Heaven City. In the tallest of the devilish pyramids, there was a crimson-robed young man looking out the window toward Deep Heaven City with crimson light flashing within his eyes. There's no mistaking this aura. Someone must have made a late body integration stage breakthrough. HMPH, that's rather troublesome. This enormous aura suggests that this isn't just some ordinary late body integration stage being. I'll have to prepare some countermeasures for this, the young man murmured to himself as his eyes narrowed slightly. The young man was none other than the final sacred ancestor Zhu Guang clone, which was the commander of the devilish army in this area. Seated on a stone chair not far away from the window was a burly man in a silver beast-like garment. He was currently munching on the bloody hind leg of a certain beast, and he said in a slightly garbled voice, "A mere late body integration stage being is nothing to be worried about. Rest assured, just leave them to me. He, you invited me all the way over here precisely because you wanted me to clear out some obstacles for you. Isn't that right?" The man had an extremely muscular physique with gleaming bronze skin, and he was giving off a bone-chilling aura akin to that of a vicious beast. "There's no need to trouble you over something like this, Brother Xiang. I invited you here to deal with an even more troublesome fellow. I can't be sure if he's returned to Deep Heaven City or not, but if he's not present in the city, then I'll leave this late body integration stage being to you," Zhu Guang replied. This burly man was clearly only a late body integration stage devilish being, but Zhu Guang seemed to be quite wary of him and was referring to him as an equal. "Oh, is the opponent you want me to take care of going to be even more formidable than this late body integration stage being?" the burly man asked with a hint of surprise in his eyes. "I believe so. I'm not sure of the specific details. All I know is that my 3 clones pursued him twice, and they returned after a failed first attempt before being wiped out during their second attempt," Zhu Guang said with furrowed brows. The burly man was astonished to hear this, and he tossed the half-eaten hind leg aside as a solemn look appeared on his face. "What? Now that you mention it, I do recall hearing some fellow Taoists mention that you sent 3 clones into this realm at once, but how could all 3 of them have been killed at once? Are you asking me to face a grand ascension stage human or demonic being?" Rest assured, Brother Xiang, I wouldn't make you battle a grand ascension stage being for me. The target in question is merely mid-body integration stage human cultivator, but he possesses a set of incredible abilities, and even the average late-body integration stage cultivator is no match for him. Those 3 clones of mine most likely perished by his hands. As the #1 devilish lord of our holy race, you're the best choice to deal with such an opponent, Zhu Guang replied. "Stop trying to flatter me. If that man could kill all 3 of your clones at once, then even if his powers are inferior to mine, it wouldn't be by much. You have to double my compensation. Otherwise, I'm not taking this job," the burly man said without any hesitation. "All right, but you have to leave all of his treasures to me," sacred ancestor Zhu Guang agreed, also without any hesitation. "Oh, looks like this human cultivator is either carrying some powerful treasures or has something that you desperately need. Otherwise, you wouldn't have agreed so easily. So be it, the original compensation you promised me was already quite a hefty amount. Now that you're doubling it, I'll agree to leave all of his treasures to you. I'm really curious to see what kind of abilities this human cultivator possesses that allowed him to kill all 3 of your clones. Looks like I'll be able to enjoy a good battle this time," the burly man said with a ferocious smile as he cracked his knuckles. In that instant, He truly resembled a vicious beast that was just barely able to contain its killing intent. Zhu Guang was very pleased with the man's reaction, and he nodded with a smile as he said, "I'm offering such a large sum in compensation precisely because I'm confident in your abilities, Brother Xiong. It won't be long until we launch our main assault against Deep Heaven City. Prior to that, you should take some rest to recover from the energy you expended to descend into this realm so you can face this opponent in your best condition." "I don't need to rest to recover from such a trivial amount of energy expenditure. Seeing as there's nothing for me to do here, I'll go take a stroll and see if I can entertain myself. This is the spirit realm. Surely you sacred ancestors won't continue to restrict me here." A cold look suddenly appeared on the burly man's face as he spoke. Zhu Guang's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, but he then immediately smiled and replied, "Of course, you are free to do whatever you want here, Brother Xiong." The burly man immediately rose to his feet and departed without even bidding farewell to Zhu Guang, leaving Zhu Guang to look on with a resigned expression. This so-called number one devilish lord clearly wasn't displaying much respect toward Zhu Guang. Of course, this could mostly be attributed to the fact that Zhu Guang was only present in this realm in the form of a clone, rather than his true body. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the burly man was, he wouldn't dare to act in such an uncouth manner. A contemplative look appeared on Zhu Guang's face for a moment before he suddenly yelled, "Summon the 10 generals to come and see me. Letter 1D487, letter 1D667, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4E, letter 1D66C, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D664, letter 1D4F6. "Yes, Master Zhu Guang," someone outside immediately answered in a respectful manner before rushing away to do his bidding. Only then did Zhu Guang return to his seat and begin to carefully ponder some things. Meanwhile, after absorbing sufficient spiritual qi, the giant projection in Deep Heaven City finally reverted back into an azure ball of light that descended toward the stone pagoda in a flash. The ball of light then vanished amid a flash of spiritual light, and Han Li, who was situated on the deepest level of the pagoda, slowly opened his eyes as an ecstatic look appeared on his face. So this is the late body integration stage. It really is completely different from the mid-body integration stage. I'm now one step away from the grand ascension stage. The path to immortality is finally becoming a reality. Han Li murmured to himself as he experienced the dramatically enhanced magic power and spiritual sense within his body. Following this successful breakthrough, both his magic power and spiritual sense had almost doubled, and they would both only continue to increase as he continued cultivating. The only thing that he was rather disappointed about was that his physical body hadn't been enhanced by much. It seemed that the rumors that one could only reform their physical body after reaching the grand ascension stage were true. As for the benefits that one derived from that reformation, that would depend on their latent aptitude and the cultivation arts they were using. With that in mind, Han Li closed his eyes again and immediately began fortifying his new cultivation base, as well as to recover the huge amount of energy he had lost during his tribulation transcendence. Due to the fact that he had to expend a lot of magic power and spiritual sense to combat the inner demon, he was forced to use many treasures to help him transcend the tribulation. The late body integration stage tribulation was far more fearsome than he had imagined, and he was forced to detonate over 10 top-grade treasures that he had obtained over the years. Even his 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords had been damaged as he had pushed them too far. If it weren't for the fact that his 2 extreme mountains possessed a resistance toward heavenly lightning and shielded him from the final few waves of lightning strikes, he definitely would have been severely wounded, even if he had still managed to successfully transcend this tribulation. However, following this late body integration stage tribulation transcendence, Han Li's confidence in the 5 extreme mountains was boosted even further, and his determination to refine the remaining 3 extreme mountains was reaffirmed. His grand ascension stage tribulation was only going to be even more fearsome than this late body integration stage tribulation. Without the 5 extreme mountains, he wasn't confident about his chances of success at all. On top of that, the 5 extreme mountains were also going to be extremely important for the periodic major heavenly tribulations that would befall him in the future. After lingering on this final thought for a moment, Han Li completely relaxed and immersed himself in his cultivation. Warm magic power flowed throughout his entire body, and he meditated for around half a month without awakening even once. On this day, the door of the secret chamber was suddenly opened on its own by a gust of fierce wind, An azure light flashed as Han Li emerged from within, then cast his gaze over the surrounding area. "We pay our respects to Master. Congratulations on your breakthrough, Brother Han." Qi Lingzi, Hai Yueshan, and the Ice Phoenix were all standing guard nearby, and as soon as Han Li emerged, they immediately converged toward him with elation etched on their faces. "He, without your assistance, I'm not sure I would have made it. Let's continue our conversation in the hall. You two can come along as well," Han Li said to the trio. The trio naturally had no objections, and they immediately followed Han Li to the top floor of the pagoda. A short while later, Han Li and the Ice Phoenix had taken a seat in the hall on the top floor, while Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan were standing respectfully off to the side. They seemed to be even more excited than Han Li was about his breakthrough. With such an incredibly powerful master, no one would dare to look down on them again. Even beings with far higher cultivation bases than them would have to treat them with respect. "Brother Han, I had thought that with my heavenly phoenix bloodline, my aptitude wouldn't be inferior to anyone. But now, I truly don't know what to say. I bet even you didn't anticipate that you would make such incredible progress back when we joined forces to ascend to the spirit realm through that spatial node. With your formidable abilities, you're most likely the most powerful being in both the human and demon races below only those two grand ascension stage seniors. I can't help but be a little envious," the Ice Phoenix said in a slightly awestruck manner. "My progress up to this point was heavily dependent on luck. Without your true spirit bloodline and exceptional cultivation aptitude, it's only a matter of time before you reach the same level, so there's certainly no need to be envious of me," Han Li replied with a calm shake of his head. "I certainly hope so. During my recent cultivation, I can feel that I'm approaching a bottleneck. It looks like I'm also not far away from making a breakthrough," the Ice Phoenix replied with a nod. Then I'll have to congratulate you in advance," Han Li said with a smile. The Ice Phoenix smiled in response, but gave no further reply. "Qi Lingzi, has anything happened during my time in seclusion?" Han Li asked. "Recently, many cultivators have been mobilized in the city, and there are rumors going around, stating that the devilish army is about to launch an all-out attack against the city. Also, following your tribulation transcendence, many of the sects and powers in the city sent congratulatory messages and presents. I've tallied up all of the presents and stored them away for you to inspect when you're ready. By the way, the elders of the city have also sent congratulatory presents, and Senior Jin invited you to go and meet the panel of elders right away after you come out of seclusion. He says that they have something important to discuss with you," Qi Lingzi replied in a respectful voice. "I'll take a look at all of the presents later. As for fellow Taoist Jin's invitation, that most likely has something to do with the devilish army. It seems I'll have to make a trip there. Seeing as the matter seems to be quite urgent, I'll head over there right away," Han Li said as he rose to his feet. Qi Lingzi and the others were slightly surprised to see Han Li leaving in such a hurry, but they naturally didn't dare to stop him. Thus, Han Li gave them a slight nod before he flew out of the hall as a streak of azure light. By the time Han Li arrived at the conference hall for the panel of elders, the white-robed elderly man and Buddhist monk Jin Yue were already waiting at the entrance, seemingly having received news of his arrival in advance. As soon as the three took a seat, the white-robed elderly man immediately offered his congratulations and swept his spiritual sense toward Han Li, upon which he was given quite a shock. Han Li's current powers were as unfathomable as an ocean, and even the white-robed elderly man was completely unable to ascertain his exact cultivation base. How was this possible? He was a mid-body integration cultivator. Even if his powers were inferior to those of a late-body integration cultivator, there shouldn't be such a massive disparity. There were only two possible explanations for this, the first of which was that Han Li was using some type of secret technique or treasure to disguise his own cultivation base. The second possibility was that Han Li's magic power had truly become too unfathomable for his spiritual sense to properly detect. The white-robed elderly man's expression remained unchanged, but he immediately ascertained that the first possibility was quite implausible. After all, if Han Li had a way to disguise his own cultivation base, then he would have used it back when he was a mid-body integration cultivator. Why would he do something like this now, when everyone already knew that he was at the late-body integration stage? If it were the latter. The white-robed elderly man couldn't help but draw a sharp breath, and the tone of his voice unconsciously became even more polite. Buddhist monk Jin Yue's expression also remained unchanged, but his astonishment was no less potent than that of the white-robed elderly man. Even though he already had a very high estimate of Han Li's powers, it appeared that he had still underestimated him. After making some brief small talk, Han Li said, "I've already received the congratulatory presents the two of you have sent to me. Allow me to offer my thanks. Now then, I'm sure you've invited me here to discuss an urgent matter, so let's cut straight to the chase." The white-robed elderly man and Buddhist monk Jin Yue exchanged a glance before the former said, "In that case, I won't delay any longer either. Following your progression to the late body integration stage, you are already the most powerful cultivator in the city. Forgive me for being blunt, but what would you estimate your own chances to be if you were to go up against a sacred ancestor clone?" A sacred ancestor clone? That's hard to say. After all, the sacred ancestors all possess different powers and abilities. I don't know anything about the sacred ancestor clone outside the city, so I can't say anything definitive about it. But if it's anything like the sacred ancestor clones I've faced in the past, then I should have a decent chance of securing victory, Han Li replied after a long pause for contemplation.